do, good people, black people, yellow people? This is your boy, Miguel, and this is Common Conversations. This is day 2 of the Move Forward, our conversation about race, equity, diversity, inclusion. Y'all know how we get down. So if you're watching this live, welcome. If you end up listening to pieces of this on the podcast later, thank you. And if you watch it later, we still love you, and we appreciate you being down with us, right? So I want to give a shout out real quick to a couple of our partners who help make this happen. So Metro United Way, we want to thank you. One Southern Indiana, we want to thank you. And right now, we are sitting in community action, One Southern Indiana's computer room, right? And so when we wanted to do a space, we wanted to do a community conversation about race, about moving forward, the first step is getting the community to invest in the conversation, right? And then next will be investing in the action. And so this is the first step. So I want to thank everybody who has been a partner, who will continue to be a partner, and I hope that we'll even inspire some new partners in this space. Yesterday, we had a great panel discussion or conversation, however you want to see it. I love to wrap up with Tim FIndley and Pastor Chad, because they brought some fire and hopefully inspired everybody to really think about what we're doing in terms of our political spaces, what we're doing in our economic and business spaces. And you know, if I may recall, one of the conversations and something that Pastor Tim said, you know, I've been saying for a really long time in this conversation about allies and friends, I'd rather have friends than allies, because allies tend to switch, right? And allies tend to shoot you in the back. And he said, you know, let's take a step forward and let's talk about accomplices. And I was like, yo, I like that. So we want accomplices, right? We want friends, right? In this conversation and in this debate and in this war to eradicate racism. This is Common Convo. Y'all know how we get down. We're gonna have some fun. I got a dope conversation throughout the entire day. So I'm gonna be a host for the first segment. Nicole Bolden's coming in town. I got Dana Black coming in town. We got State Rep Cherish Pryor. They're gonna come in here and drop just straight heat, right? And because their dialogue is bananas anyway. And I think you're really gonna enjoy it. I think it's gonna be really inspiring. And we're gonna have fun having a conversation that most people won't dare to do, right? Definitely not in public. And that's what's important as we're talking about moving forward beyond racism. What does our society look like? What do we look like in Southern Indiana, Kentuckiana, and going forward? How do we create the great experiment right here at home where it affects us the most? And it's super important. Yesterday, I asked a series of questions and I said, hey, look, you know, for everybody who is in this game, there are things that we as black people, we as white people need to be asking and getting answers to. And that first series, if you didn't watch it, I'm gonna repeat these for you. And that first set of questions for society is, and this is mostly for white folks, but some black people too, because black people impede progress as well. And that's something that we'll also have to talk about. But first question, when you see a black person, what do you see? When you see an African American, what do you see? What does equality and equity mean to you? What does diversity and inclusion mean to you? And how has racism impacted both America, impacted Indiana, impacted Jeffersonville, New Albany, Louisville, Kentucky? How has it impacted your life with your peers? For some of my good white people, do you even have black friends? I'm not talking about the guy or the gal you sit across from at a board meeting, but do you go to dinner? Do you do more than just coffee? Are we doing more than just golfing? Can you tell me my birthday, right? Do you care when I'm hurt? Just thoughts I'm throwing out there, right? Questions we need to have answers to, right? And what does living in a non-racial environment with a non-racial culture actually look like? And these are things that we have to think about, because just as much as many of us want change, there are probably just as many who don't. And we can't continue, right, to look the other way and say, my racist buddy didn't mean it like that, right? Because a couple of years ago, around about 2016, I think there was an election and Trump was running, and KKK was running a little wild in Indiana as a whole. Now we know this is their backyard and their playing ground, and that's okay, not really. But here's the reality. One of the things that happened in Madison, Indiana, the KKK was rallying, it was in all the newspapers, and leadership told the black people, the best thing we can do for you is for you to stay home. And I was thinking to myself, in 2016, did you really just say that? Did you really say the protection of black people when faced with domestic terrorism, the best thing we can do is stay home? And that's from the leadership of our community. We have a lot of work to do. We got a lot to talk about, and we have a lot to change. I'm gonna be talking and sharing a little bit of everything today. And so we've got some great hosts and some great panelists. And what's even more cool is that Teah and I, if you hang out long enough, are gonna actually do our conversation, how we do it, in private, publicly for you, unapologetically and unscripted. So you're gonna see how we dare to get it wrong, how we dare to get it right, and how we dare to look at futures past so we can move forward. That being said, we're gonna go to a quick commercial. Actually, let me take that back. We're gonna go to a great presentation because sitting next to me is the youth NAACP. I've got Kendi Motley. I've got, of course, my favorite, because it's my shug. I got Williams-Hampton. And we're going to talk about race from a youth standpoint, because the reality of it is, my black ass don't want to be sitting here 40 years from now and my daughter having the same conversation about the same issues, because that's not a move forward. The fact that I'm having a conversation that my parents had and my grandparents had and my great-great-grandparents had is appalling. But we're here to learn and move forward. Rakai, if you will take us to this great presentation with Elise Owens, who is part of Youth NAACP, who prepared a poem for us. I think you guys are gonna love it. It's gonna be inspiring. Check it out.
My name's Elise Owens. I'm ready to tip over Pandora's box. I'm ready to unwind the intertwined snakes trapped inside the vines. I am truly ready for the masquerade mask to finally fall and for the truth to drop the camouflage. Living our truth is absolute chaos and destruction to them. But then again, who really likes consequences? Who really likes to have the finger being pointed at them? Who really likes to have to clean up the mess that they made? Nobody. But who really needs consequences? Who really needs to be held accountable? Anyone and everyone. We've seen what happens when one isn't. So when we as a community, a coterie, a faction, start to break away from a system that never welcomed us, a system that never intended for our stay to be joyful and easy, keep in mind that we received everything but that. Just like in the great game of Jenga, when that one distinct piece is removed, it all comes tumbling down. Once we all come to a consensus as a community and realize that we as a community are that one distinct and sacred piece, and realize that the game comes tumbling down without us, we can finally rebuild our own game with our own rules. Now, our first few rounds were paused by massacres, assassinations, and drownings. But we're on the come up. We're on the rebound. The ball is in our court. The scent of silent compliance has grown quite spoiled and stale. The smell of fear has a very unique and distinct scent, which can easily be confused with the notion of minding one's business or choosing not to be argumentative. But as long as we stand with nose plugs in, we can't be surprised when we finally smell what they're cooking up this whole time. Unplug yourself. I'm willing to reopen and to plunge into my most deepest and most painful wounds. I'll go so deep that I'll plant new knowledge and new sorrow, and watch it bloom and resonate into something so beauteous and captivating, almost surreal-like. My people's pain has once again become entertainment and exciting to many. A hashtag, a repost, a trend, a constant battle to prove that our lives matter. This is not a Halloween costume. I cannot take my blackness off when it's not convenient to me. This right here is the true ride or die. This right here is the only rep that I said. This is a part of me. They'll keep poking and poking at our wounds, and they'll proceed to act surprised when we react and call us irrational. Hoping to see defeat on our tired faces. Hoping to see the white flag waving in alliance. hoping to prevail over our tired hearts and tired souls. We'll leave them in despair and despondency. Giving up and giving in has never been our forte. Enduring and prevailing has always been our taste, a bittersweet taste really. Tart-like with sweet notes entail. Moving forward, as we begin to drop the shackles and the leg irons impressed in our minds, as we begin to get up and dust ourselves off from being under Uncle Tom's boot for far too long, we will become drenched in the smell of triumph victory. Don't worry, I've gotten a whiff of it. It smells divine. You'll love it. Moving forward, as long as we keep our minds and our hearts clear and our eyes envision with the ending goal, we will be there in Fort Worth and arrive with gratitude and joy, finally getting to wipe the sweat from our foreheads and rest. But not for too long, of course. There's so much work to do. Moving forward, we will rise and blossom once again. This is per usual for us. You may have thought you had us, but you never did. You may have thought that you had outsmarted us. But at this game, we are the grand masters. Moving forward, we will rise. Moving forward, we will blossom. Moving forward, we will conquer. Once again and once and for all.
What it do? I know y'all loved that. I loved it, right? When she came by the studio and dropped that, I was like, yo, that's fire, let's get it. But we're here. I mean, this is one of y'all peers. And I'm excited to have y'all here and have this conversation. I think it's probably more interesting, for you than it would be for Shug, because we probably do this more often than not. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say too. Like in this world of racism, the world that you live in, I don't want it to be my words. I want people out there. I don't want it to be their words. I want them to hear from y'all and your experience at how old are you?
I'm 16.
So, all right, Kendi, you're 16. Shug, how old are you?
17.
You're 17. So at 16 and 17, what does this life look like? And then before we walk away from this conversation today, I would like to hear what you want this life to be like, when you get to my age, right? So here's a couple of questions for folks who are going to dare and engage in these conversations. Bring the youth in it early, not late. But number two, so here's a question. How does your child see America? And that's the first question for y'all. How does your child see your community, right? And then how do they define what their community is and what it should look like tomorrow? So as we jump into this conversation, y'all can share whatever y'all want. It's unscripted, but I'm gonna ask my first question for y'all. When is the first time you experienced racism? Or have you not?
You can go first. The first time that I experienced racism, I didn't know how to navigate it because it was in the 3rd grade.
Okay.
All through elementary school, I was always the only one. It was probably not until middle school when I finally saw other kids that like me in school. So I think I was in the breakfast line, and a white boy called me nigger. And I didn't really know what to do about it. I knew it was wrong because my mom wanted to instill that this world is scary early, at an early age. She kind of wanted the dolls, playing with dolls, Barbies. She wanted that to be quick because that's not going to be around forever.
Okay.
So she instilled that in me quickly. And I think I choked them in the lunch line.
You gotta do that.
I know, but I felt I didn't know how to navigate it, real talk. Because we're in 3rd grade, we're kids, and I'm sure he didn't know how to navigate it, all honesty. Because that's not something you pick up like mama, dad, like you saw that.
Yeah.
So it's probably my first time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think my first time, it might have been 4th grade, it happened to me. I was in the computer lab and I was asking for help. And he told me to lose my attitude because I had an attitude problem apparently. And this is when I switched from Spring Hill to Rock Creek, and it was like a mostly white school. I was one of the only black kids in that school. And so I didn't know how to get onto some kind of website. And I was like, hey, can you help me? He was like, lose the attitude and I will help you. And I was like, I don't have an attitude. And I was full on arguing with him at this point. And so he was like, I will help you when you lose your attitude. And I was like, can you help me, please? And so then I got help my 3rd time. It wasn't with me, it was with another kid. And he was Mexican kid, Jose, and he spoke Spanish. And there was this book that we were reading, and it was in Spanish, and I didn't really see any difference in people ever. But that day, she was like, Jose, can you read for us? And he was like, why? And she was like, because you speak Spanish. And he was like, oh. And then I looked at him, and I was like, oh, you are kind of different than me, and you look different than me. And I was like, huh. So that was kind of my like touch with seeing somebody different and kind of having my own little thought on him. And then also 4th grade was kind of my first kind of, you know, stereotype, the black girl in the class who's asking for help.
Wow. So y'all learned it early. And it's interesting, Kenya, you said something your mom wanted to teach you, that this world is harsh early on. And I want to touch on that a little bit, but I want to share a story because for Teah and I, as it relates to Maria, we wanted to avoid teaching her this early, and we didn't get the opportunity to. Her first experience with racism was before she knows it. So she had to be about 2 or 3 years old. We're at an all-white church in Ohio, and this little 6-year-old girl walks up to Maria and says, "Why are you black?" And Suge walks out of the daycare, out of the church, and comes up to us, and she's like, "Mommy, Daddy, why am I black?" And you know, I was like, damn it. I thought we could avoid this just a little bit longer. And it's unfortunate. But so the lessons that your mom said, you know, mom wanted to teach you that this world was harsh early. So she apparently has instilled some skill sets in terms of how do you deal with white people?
Well, with being around white people, there's no escape. You're always, because they're the majority. You know, they're always going to be around. So I feel like with also putting me in spaces and places where I'm always going to be maybe the only one sometimes, she wanted me to be grounded in who I was. When me and my sister, she wanted to start early. You got to start early. You have to start early. She wanted to ground us early in who we are so we can be secure in any space we walk in. Now, how do I deal with white people? I'm still learning.
Okay, let's go.
I'm still learning. I see new things every day. I hear new things every day. I'm still learning.
You still
learning?
So
I really don't know yet.
How you want to do it?
Yeah.
So when racist encounters, when those come, how do you deal
They
with those?
take me by surprise every time.
Really?
Yeah.
They catch you so off guard. Being in science class.
I freeze.
Being in science class and hearing a white girl say, nigga. Just like, whoa. And half the time, you're the only black person in there. So you have nobody to back you up if you want to say something. It's kind of a loner situation. Anytime you're in those situations, it makes you feel lonely. Because it's like, my people are not here with me to back me up. It's like scary, kind of.
What school do you go to?
Jeff,
Okay.
Jeffersonville High School.
Sure.
So what did you want me to answer?
So, you know, how do you, it's kind of weird asking my daughter the question, right? So we're about to find out if I get it right or wrong. How do you deal with white people?
So white people my age, I kind of deal with them kind of the same as I deal with anybody else my age, because it's just kind of like, you know, I don't know you, I don't know who you are. But older white people, I tend to have caution. I talk very slowly. I kind of like heighten my voice a little bit. I sound proper. I sound like a white girl, basically. And I kind of try to sound as innocent and as unprovoking as possible. So at work, I work with, well, it's Jeff, so it's mostly white people, and I'll encounter some white people, and I'll try to seem very soft and very kind, and they like me because I'm not coming off as aggressive or as the angry black girl. And so I try to kind of not separate myself from the stereotype to make sure that I'm safe and make sure that, you know, they don't have any issues with me, because there has been some points where I have, you know, not talked like that and they've had a problem with me.
So when you don't speak a King's English,
they tend to come at me in a certain kind of way, and I'm kind of like, okay.
That's a good point. We have to kind of go out of our way, especially girls, black girls, kind of go out of our way to be soft, kind, and reserved.
Kind of like catering to them.
Yeah.
I have to cater to you for me to be okay, and for me to not feel like you're gonna scream at me for still me just doing my job.
And that is what my mom did not want. for
I don't
me
want
to
that
have.
either.
Oh,
It
Yeah.
no,
crushes my
no,
heart.
absolutely. No black parent wants that for the child, and that was her fear. And even though she's instilled this in me so hard, I still to this day do that.
Yeah.
I still to this day, no escape.
That kind of pisses me off, and this is my show, so whoever's out there doing it, y'all know these kids. I'm giving you the middle finger. Let's ask this: what would you want society to look like? What does a post-non-racial society look like to you? Can you even imagine it?
Right.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
People would have to want to do it. People who benefit from racism would have to want society to move on, because white people benefit from it, let's be honest. And in order for we as a community and we as a nation to move on, they would have to give up that benefit and give up that privilege in order for us to even be on the same playing field.
And acknowledge, they always say, why always make it about race? It's always about race. This world was created off race, class, gender, structured that way. It's always about race. So I couldn't imagine a non-racial caste system, honestly. Acknowledge it. I say you need to acknowledge my race, acknowledge my blackness, acknowledge who I am. I think that's where we should start. I think that's when we'll see progress. When we acknowledge each other and who we are and respect it.
Okay. Both of y'all honor students at Jeff High, right? Seniors, juniors?
Seniors.
So seniors, so both seniors, both honor students, right? So, but y'all might be different, right? Y'all might be different than the black kid who doesn't have a lot of money, who's not an honor student. Do you think they see, if you're experiencing in our community this level of, we're gonna use bias so y'all feel safe out there. No, we're not. Racism, right? How do you think your peers experience it?
I feel like it doesn't matter how smart you are, if you're black, or how rich you are. If you're black, you're going to experience the same amount. It just depends on where you are. It doesn't matter, like, if you're poor or if you're rich or if you're smart, if you're dumb, you're still black
At the end of the day?
at the end of the day. So it doesn't matter.
Okay. If you could, this program specifically, we're talking about how we move forward, right? How we move forward as a community, how we move forward as a people. And the reality of it is that it really should be coming from y'all, right? What do you want to see at 20, 30, 40 years old? How do we change our community? If there was something that you could say to school teachers, like a Scott Hawkins, because we know you teach white supremacy in your classroom. One day we'll talk about that. Or we're talking about a mayor who says, I don't have an African-American plan for the city.
Right.
How do y'all address that?
Honestly, I wouldn't want somebody like that around me or in my school.
Okay.
Because it's a very dangerous thing to teach. Because, me and Kendi, we know better. We know that, how he teaches is very, like you said, white supremacy. But those other kids don't know better. And even if I do know better, and some of the stuff that he said sounded right and sounded it made sense. But then I had to realize that, that's not it.
So he tells really a one-sided history.
Yeah, one-sided history.
Absolutely, and I feel like if your teaching involves lifting up one person, but as you're doing that, it's putting down another community, you done crossed the line.
Or he would kind of make it sound like it was at someone's benefit, but it wasn't. So I think at one point we were talking about it was colonization in Africa and how they would build schools, but they would be able to use them or something like that. And I was like, no, they wouldn't.
Wow.
And so he was saying it as it was a benefit for them because they were using it, but they were building it, but they were only building them. They weren't allowed to use them. They weren't allowed to use the railroads that they were building or businesses that they were building. They weren't allowed to use any of that stuff, but he made it seem like they could use it.
Okay. If you could say anything, because I know you have to go to work, and I don't want to keep you all day. We can do this. We should do this more often. Absolutely. Matter of fact, we should do a whole youth segment if y'all are up to it.
Sure.
I will create it. We'll do a youth segment. We can do a monthly, whatever y'all want to do. We can get in and have this conversation. But while you're here, I did this project with WHAS, and it was called Why You Were Listening, or Why I Have Your Attention. So while we have 5 minutes left in this thing, right, in this part of this conversation, we have the attention of whoever's going to view this right now and who might view this later. What would you say to them that would help rebuild or build a better future for y'all? Who wants it first? Let's do that.
I'll go first.
Okay.
You know, the topic, the big key point right now is moving forward. And I feel like the big thing that would help us move forward, we are moving backward on as I am speaking. Laws banning the teaching of critical race theory. Just recently, I'm sure we're all aware, Juneteenth was just founded as a federal holiday. However, I feel like both of these events contradict one another. The education we start learning as young kids reflects the history and the people in the history we respect. The people in the history we are taught daily are white people. And who do we have to respect the most? White people. Columbus Day, Washington's birthday, even Christmas. In these history classes, we are taught as to why we are learning these in the first place, why we celebrate these in the first place. But you're going to take away the history of Juneteenth, the importance. And what I feel like now, what I want to say is the education system cannot ban critical race theory. So it's so interesting how that's always been what I felt like would help, a key thing to help us for our future is putting critical race theory in education, and then how relevant they're trying to ban it. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like that's a big deal, and what can help us move forward.
All right, thank you. So, you got anything?
Mine would be holding people accountable, you know, whether it's a singular person or it's an institution, if it's the medical field, if it's the judicial system, anything that has participated in any kind of minority or POC suppression or us being held back. I feel like they need to be held accountable in order for us to move forward, because it's them that's doing it. And so unless they get held accountable, there's nothing that can happen.
Right.
There's nothing that can happen. This is the voice of our youth. You know, I've been arguing much of this my whole life, and we've been here for 17 years here, meeting in Southern Indiana, and we've had these conversations. I've had these conversations on boards I've sat on. I've had these conversations in the programs that we do called Black Votes Matter. I've had these conversations in women's empowerment. Or I should say the ladies, the women have had this conversation. And even more recently, as my wife and I have traveled up and down, even as far as Jasper, we've had these conversations, and you're hearing it from adults. And I think this is, now you get to hear it from our youth, right? We're not making this thing up. And if you make our children feel like this, how do you think we feel, right? And are you preparing a country, a city, a county, right, to continue to oppress and abuse? Because this is abuse. Whether we want to admit it or not, we'll put money in spouse abuse, domestic violence, but this is not much different. We can call this domestic violence. And we need to start educating who is the predator and who is the prey, and how we can make the adjustment for those who are doing it. Look, we're going to go to commercial. We're going to be back in a couple of minutes. We'll pick this conversation up. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Kenny, I appreciate you for daring to share this.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Like, this is, man, we need to study our folks. We need to learn from our folks. Shug, you going to hang back and do a little more with me?
Yes.
All right, done deal. We're going to go to break. We'll be back here in just a second. On June 17th and 18th, we are inviting you to face a common conversation about race, inclusion, diversity, equity, and the impact systemic racism has had on white and BIPOC communities. Our esteemed group of panelists include Indiana's own Dana Black, Charlestown Mayor Treva Hodges, State Representative Cherish Pryor, and Louisville's own Tim Finley Jr., and a host of other influential community leaders. Join us as we embark upon brave and necessary conversations about the move forward.
Start it up.
Yo, this is Gelly Gale. We're back from commercial. This is Common Conversations, and this is our segment called The Move Forward. Again, thank you for tuning in. If you're tuning in with us, or if you're watching it later, either way it goes, it's a thank you, right? I'm sitting here with, we were sitting here with two of our youth NAACP leaders and thriving Black leaders, strong Black women that are coming up in our community. And Teah, unfortunately, had to leave us, but I'm glad that she was here to share with everyone and me, right? Because sometimes we are ignoring the reason we're in this fight. We're ignoring the reason that we're having this conversation, and that is truly to build the future for our children. And we as a community, we as a nation have actively failed them because we keep having the same conversation without action. Right? We haven't had any strong, large moves to eradicate racism since ever. We can say definitely we've had some nice steps, right? Because, civil rights was a good step in the right direction. But at some point we took one step and we never ran. We never got off running, right? We never really shifted the white supremacy that lives in our communities at large, right? But this conversation is about where the youth are and where they see this community. And I'd really love to invite someone who thinks different than I do to sit down and have this conversation so that we can do this live with a little bit of opposing positioning, right? So things that I want, again, going back to the question, as we're talking about moving forward, questions to ask your child. How do they see the community? What are they experiencing in our education system? How are they experiencing when they're approaching an officer, right? How are their teachers treating them in the school system? These are things we have to know if we're talking about moving forward and change. Sugar Bear, we do this a lot. Like I have 101 nicknames for my daughter, and I invited her to come sit and parlay. Normally when we do this, we just goofing off and having fun. But we do have serious conversations in the house.
Yes.
And this is probably a little intimidating. I imagine sitting in front of the camera.
Just a little camera shy.
A little camera shy,
Yeah.
But they won't hurt you
Yeah, I know.
because I'll shoot them. Here's a fun thing, right? In 1969, James Baldwin, when he was in Cambridge, had he quoted Bobby Kennedy, and so Bobby Kennedy apparently has said that in 40 years, if Black people act right, we might get a Black president. And I always thought that was an interesting statement because that was in 1969, and I thought, wow, give or take a couple of years, I guess Black people acted right because your first president was
a Black president.
was a Black president. Let's get it, right? So that was inspiring. And I thought about at the same time as you and Teah were talking, and I said, what does it do? Will we ever get to a post-racist America? And Obama ran on hope, but y'all both said, no, you don't actually think that we could get to a utopia in America that would be non-racist.
Yes, but he gave us the hope that, things could possibly get better.
Okay.
To where someone like us could get to that kind of power. Or, that stereotype that Black people are thugs or that we're less than is just a stereotype. It's not real because one of us got up there. and one of us made it.
Okay.
So that's another kind of hope.
Got you. So he he instilled hope that you could become.
Yeah.
So that this idea that we say is the American dream could be rational, realized.
Could be real.
Okay.
Because, you know, because I don't know how to phrase this. If it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't possibly be able to see it.
Mm.
Because, you know, all of our presidents have been white. The majority of them have been racist. And, you know, if I didn't have that black president, then maybe I couldn't possibly see that, you know, maybe we have the opportunity, or this country can move on from our past, or at least learn from it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So here's another one. And this is a random question for you, and you can choose not to answer it. So again, for those who are watching, we do unscripted conversations. This is not something we sat around and said, this is what we're gonna plan to do, right? This is off the cuff, and she can choose or not choose to answer the question. But the part of this is because I sit in so many white rooms, and I hear so many white people say, I'm afraid to have the conversation. Well, I want you to know that we are too sometimes, because we are the casualty in the conversation. We are the abused in the conversation, and we have to look at you and tell you, the abuser, not everybody, but some of you, to stop. And if you've ever been faced with domestic violence, I grew up in a household of domestic violence, that's one of the hardest things to do. But that being said, how do you live in my house?
Oh, lots and lots of sleep. Lots of sleep.
So you have to sleep to keep me to be quiet?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Lots of sleep and lots of music to drown you out.
To drown me out sometimes?
Yes.
Because I'm like this all the time?
Yes, all the time.
All the time?
And coffee.
And that can be toxic too, isn't it?
What, coffee?
No, well, yes, coffee. No, me talking about racism all the time.
Yes.
So we have to know when to turn it off?
Yeah, we have to know when to turn it off, because, you know, talking about it too much can really impact your mental health.
Okay.
And because, you know, you're always on guard, kind of trying to hear racism and trying to figure out if anything is covertly happening around you. And so it makes you paranoid. Because I had that when we went to go protest the first night.
Yeah.
So there were lots of loud booming and kind of, you know, tear gas flying. And for a while, fireworks would freak me out.
Yes.
Or,
yes.
you know, like sometimes when people's cars would pop, that would freak me out. And so, or I would always be watching my back.
So let's talk about this, because we went protesting in Louisville.
Yeah, like a
couple times. We was in it. So I want to share this story because I was working late. It was the second night that they were protesting, and they were protesting against the death of Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
And I get this phone call, and it's, Dad, I want to go downtown Louisville because I have a voice. And I was like, hell nah. I know what a war zone looks like. Definitely in America. I'm not in the Army, but understand, I grew up fighting white people physically. I know what that looks like. And we're going down there where they got tear gas and they're shooting kids in the face with rubber bullets, right, who are unarmed. And I was like, no, we're not doing it. And then your mom texted me and said, but who better to take her than you, because you're gonna make sure she come home. And I said, well, I was born for this. And who better to take you in the front line of whatever this is so that you can experience and see it for whatever it is than me. And so we went down there.
Yeah.
And I told you we could go through phases of it, because there were phases, right? There were different groups.
Yeah.
But you decided you wanted to go like in it.
Yeah, I went in it. And, you know, the tension in there was thick. It was super thick. You could feel the intensity. But, you know, everyone was there for each other. All the protesters were together.
Yeah.
And they were helping. If you got tear gas, they had a thing of milk to, you know, wash your eyes out. They had blankets to, you know, cover your face if you did get tear gas or if you were about to get tear gas. And, you know, also after, because, like, the media sometimes, you know, twist things. And, and when they would say that it was violent and the protesters were violent, it wasn't like that. It was the complete opposite. Actually, there wasn't much of anything from the protesters. It was either the police or it was people coming from the outside that didn't have good intentions. And so it was also cool because I feel like if I didn't go, I probably would have thought the exact same thing, that they were violent and that, you know, they weren't there for the right reasons. But I did go, and I was like, this isn't how they're saying it is.
So, you know, when we hear these rumors through social media or these platforms and folks are saying, hey, you know, it was violent, they were down there, you know, rioting and burning down buildings,
and,
you know.
and breaking into places. It was nothing like that.
It wasn't nothing like that.
It was nothing like that.
And that's good to hear. And I think it's also equally good to hear because you said that had you not been there, you would have assumed that the lie was the truth.
Yeah, it was the truth. Because, you know, we trust the news because it's one of our main form of seeing what's going on in the world. But, you know, sometimes the news isn't telling the truth.
So let me ask you this. Can I bring this up?
Yeah.
Because we also protested in Jeff.
Yeah, we did.
And we were on 10th Street. And we kind of had this conversation this morning about Karens and
white women tears.
And white women tears.
Yes.
And can we do this?
We can do this. You can do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were on 10th Street and we're protesting. Actually, we weren't there yet. We
No.
got a phone call.
Yeah, we got a phone call. Yeah.
Okay, so we're at home and we got a phone call about there were protests on 10th Street.
Mm-hmm.
There apparently was something was going on. And so and since we live next to 10th Street,
Yeah.
we just decided to leave the house and come out on 10th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're protesting, we're really just blocking the street. You know, there was a lay down in the middle of the road. There was it was a silence for
George Floyd.
For George Floyd,
Yes.
yeah. And during this period, there was a particular white woman business owner.
It was Adrian's.
Adrian's?
It was
Okay.
Adrian's.
Who decided to pull over her car and start crying on Facebook and talking about her fear
That the protesters would come and pretty much hurt her business when we weren't even near her business.
Right, we
Like,
weren't
like
even
her
close to
business is
downtown.
downtown,
Yeah.
and we were on 10th Street, so there would be no possible way of us being near her business at the time she said what was happening. And so when that happened, I was just kind of like, that's really interesting, and people believed her.
Yes.
That it was happening, and so white women tears.
White women tears.
White women tears.
So your mom said something yesterday as the future has a past.
Mm-hmm.
What does when we say white women, we say white women's tears, what does that mean?
Situations like Emmett Till, you know, white woman says black boy harassed her, he gets killed. Tulsa, white woman says black man assaults her, entire block gone.
Whole community.
Central Park 5, DA, white woman, you know, knows they're all innocent, but still prosecutes them. They're all put in prison for majority of their young adult lives and teenage lives.
Yes.
White women tears are they are a damage to the black community. And they are killing the black community.
Literally.
Literally, you know, white women calling the police on black men just going home have killed black men.
Thank you. Because, you know, again, this is a conversation. Folks are afraid to have the conversation. Some people can't brave to have the conversation. And I will say, I've invited a lot of folks to this room to have this conversation, black, white, green, or otherwise, Republican or Democrat, who oppose or who are for the things that we talk about, because we need to share about how we move forward. And if you can't hear our side, if you can't hear her side, then how can you possibly sit here and say, I'm an ally? Because the change starts with you, the individual, the leadership, the business you run, the teacher, the superintendent, the principal. I remember I was sitting at a school board meeting and they were doing a branding exercise for Jeff High. And they had brought in a sample of all the students. And I had asked a question and said, if you're doing a branding exercise, being a marketing guy, I said, where are the African American and Latino kids? And they said, well, it's not that kind of branding exercise. And I thought, this is marketing, right? This is a study. So don't you study the population? And you guys got a lot of Black and Latino kids at the school,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, a lot.
Considering we got one high school. And so I said, okay. And then they said, there was an African kid there. And they said, well, we have such and such. And I was like, he doesn't count. He is a true African American, as in he is from Africa. He's an immigrant in this country and in that scenario. So he does not represent the Black community that has been here, right? He doesn't have the history or the experience that has been here. And I said, and we have race problems. We have domestic issues, because remember, I called this domestic violence, within our school systems. Because violence is always not hitting you. It could be financial, it could be emotional, it could be mental, long levels of it. And I remember, and they're not here anymore, but I remember a particular principal in that meeting said, we don't have race problems in our school. And as we get ready to wrap up, because I'm gonna quit throwing you out there in the world, but I want people to hear from y'all. And it can be yes or no, or you can throw it, you can answer this however you want. Do we have a race problem? Not just in Jeff High, but in your history of going to school, in the school we're sitting in, which is Spring Hill Elementary, to Jeff High, do we have a race problem in our school system?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Going here, I was in 3rd grade. My last year being in the school, I was in 3rd grade, and it was Black History Month, and I wanted to do a history project on an African queen, Queen Nzinga, and she told me she was not real. She didn't exist.
Yeah.
She wasn't real. I ended up picking somebody else, but my dad came to the school.
Because I punch people in the throat.
And talked to her in the nicest way possible, which was not nice at all. But he talked to her, and I ended up doing the project. I ended up moving schools for 4th and 5th grade. That's when I realized that, I was Black, because I was one of maybe 4 Black kids in the classroom. And, I got the, your hair is really big, can you move out the way? You have an attitude problem, blah, 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 blah. Middle school, I got called a nigger basically like a lot. One time I did end up telling my parents, and they came to the school. The kid got suspended. That was basically it. High school, I've only had 1 full year of high school, so I haven't really had that much of a, out way, but social media wise, I have seen other people, get called the N-word or have been harassed because, they were either Mexican, Black, all that kind of stuff. And for me, it wasn't kind of overt, it was covert.
Okay.
Kind of oh, you speak very well, or, you have a dad, wow, I'm so surprised. Your dad, blah, blah, blah. I've gotten that. Or which one, or kind of you're so pretty, what are you? So
there's that.
There's that.
All right. I appreciate you sharing, because again, this is a brave effort, right, to get out here and to do this. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday. There's a cost to having this conversation, economically, mentally, socially, politically. And there's a lot of people who want to have the conversation who are afraid to. And I'm going to keep repeating this, because I hope that you get inspired to get out of your shell, to get the hell out of our way, so that we can have this conversation and rebuild. Because if you remember what Pastor Chad and Pastor Tim said yesterday, in order for us to truly move forward, we can't fix what she told me at home, what is not broken, and that is the system. Pastor Chad and Tim said in order to fix this system, we have to destroy it and rebuild it. I said it last July on WHAS, we have to redesign America. But that's too big. So let's start at home, right where we are in Jeffersonville, right where we are in New Albany, right where we are in Louisville. Let's rebuild this the way we want it, so that our children don't have to sit in this chair when they're my age having the same damn conversation. Most of all, so Black people quit being killed, armed or unarmed, by our slave catchers. This is Common Conversations. We're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna get into our next segment, because I think you're gonna love it. It's all about politics, because here's the thing. It started with policy, it's gonna end with policy. And we got some gurus They're probably way more PG-13 than I am. Then again, who the hell knows? This is Common Convo. This is your boy Miguel, and we are going to commercial, and we'll be back here in a segment.
Indiana's own Dana Black here, and if you're anything like me, you get tired of waiting on the Indiana media to cover the issues that matter to Hoosier liberals, progressives, and Democrats. Our issues and candidates seem to always get ignored. Now, you don't have to wait to hear from left-leaning blue politicians regarding the issues that matter to us. Turn Left is your information source. Join us each Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern on Facebook Live. Turn Left, Indiana politics from the left side of things.
And welcome back. My name is Nicole Bolden, and I am hosting this section, and we're going to have some fun, I hope, right? So right now we're going to be talking about politics, a little bit of policy, and I'm going to turn it over to our guests. Today we have Dana Black and Cherish Pryor. So folks, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves, and we're going to start with you, Dana.
Yes, Indiana's own Dana Black. I am probably the loudest mouth in the Indiana Democratic Party. I love that because someone has to be bold and in your face, but you know, doing it with love so that we're not insulting people. We want to bring people into the fold versus turning them away. And so I'm just an advocate for good policy and making sure that we elect the right type of people who are going to be writing policies that improve lives in Indiana.
Okay. And Ms. Cherish?
And I'm State Representative Cherish Pryor. I represent District 94, which is the northwest side of Indianapolis. I've served in the General Assembly since 2008. I am also the Democratic floor leader for the House Democrats. I also serve as treasurer for the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. And one thing I will say about the Black Caucus is being a member of that organization, there are 14 African American legislators in the House of Representatives, or in the Indiana General Assembly, rather, 4 in the Senate and 10 in the House. And the one thing that I can say about the Black Caucus is that we are always advocating for our community, and also not just the African American community, but also other minority communities as well. And for senior citizens, for low-income individuals, we are the conscience of the Indiana House of the Indiana General Assembly, because someone has to speak out and for those individuals that don't have a voice and cannot afford to pay lobbyists to come and lobby for them.
That works. Okay, so before we get our conversation really rolling, and I do want this to be a conversation between the three of us, because, you know, it's one thing if I'm sitting and just asking questions and we're going through, but we all know each other. Word. So we can go back and forth, right?
We're all sisters in the game.
Right? So, but before, I kind of want to frame it and at least ask one question so that we have a sense that we're all working with some of the same operating principles. So when we talk about equity, what does it mean to you, and how does it guide the work that you do, or does it guide the work that you do? And so y'all can jump in.
Does equity guide the work that I do? No, it doesn't. And here's why. Because if I waited on equity, I wouldn't move.
Okay.
The real situation is this: there is no equity. There is none. But that does not mean I don't get to participate in the citizen government, right? I'm a citizen. I get the opportunity to participate. And no, I don't need permission to do it. I don't have to wait for someone to open a door for me. My job as a taxpaying Hoosier, a taxpaying citizen of this nation, is that I get to have a say in the direction of the policies that are created. Now, that being said, I often make a few folks uneasy because I don't know my place. But I've always said my place is wherever I decide to put my feet. Right?
Okay.
So no, I don't move from a point of equity because it does not exist. I move from a place of, I don't give a daggone what you got in my way. I know how to get over it, around it, through it, because the whole goal is to improve lives. We're going to improve, and I'm not talking abstract, right?
Okay.
I have tangible, real items that I feel like we can do better as from a government standpoint and from where the policies are impacting people on a daily basis. So it's not just this abstract thing. I know that people want clean air and clean water. Well, and in the state of Indiana, we rank in the lower third in the nation when it comes to quality water, quality air. That's tangible. That's somebody's life. They say if you have asthma, you should not live in Indiana. That's a problem. So they're real that's just one of many. I can go all day. When infrastructure, all that good stuff. But I don't work from a space of waiting for someone to give me equity. They may not ever give it to me, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to work.
Okay. Okay.
And I think Dana makes some good points. From a legislative standpoint and from a policy standpoint, when I'm thinking of equity and I'm thinking about how we can make sure that the communities who have been left out, who have not had opportunities before, because we come in at a level that's less than. So if we all get the same thing, then we're still going to be behind. So for particularly the African American community, we have to have more just to get to an equal playing field. And once we get to an equal playing field, then we can talk about giving everybody the same. But equity for me means that you got to make me equal before there could even be equity. When we think about all the policies and all the money that is being spent, everything that gets sucked out of our community, but the investments don't go back into our community.
Right.
That's a problem. So, for me, equity has to be you making me we have to be at the same level. And then we can go beyond that. Because there's so many, every category you can think of and name. The African American community is at the top of everything bad and at the low of everything good, and that's a problem.
And falling farther behind in every category.
Falling further behind, and COVID really crystallized that for us. And again, the Black Caucus members, we have been saying for years, there's a disparity in health care. And people look and say, well, you shouldn't be eating all that. You're eating the
like
wrong
my
thing.
pork chop did.
Like your pork chop did. Or no, there's nothing wrong. If we just look at it from the overall perspective, from the categories of the people, for the numbers or that are the highest, then we'll get African Americans. But you don't get the diseases that we get. You don't get the sickle cell.
Which, by the way, it took 100 years to even make an advancement on sickle cell research.
Yes, exactly. So, we just look at the categories that the majority community, that's affected by the majority of the community, then the things that are specific to us never gets covered. So equity is about listening to our issues also, in not waiting till those issues affect the communities outside of our communities and saying it's an issue. When I say it's a problem in our community, take me serious.
Yeah.
You know, and let's address that issue in my community because we don't live in silos. So eventually it's going to affect your community too. So if you address it in my community, then you don't even have to worry about it in your community.
Well, see, you said something that's, I'm sorry.
Okay.
She
No,
said
you go
something
ahead.
that is right on point, and she said, believe me when I tell you. Well, first of all, you have to respect me to believe what I'm saying. And what you have is you're asking
Actually,
people,
first you have to listen to hear what I'm saying.
well,
then
we know,
respect
but
me.
you have to,
yeah.
but see, listening, see, you're not even gonna hear my voice because you don't even think I'm human.
Okay.
You don't even think I'm human. I mean, think about it. An example, we had a Representative Greg Porter, or my representative, was they were talking about some anti-racist legislation in the State House, and I know Representative Pryor was there, and this man was telling his own story. He was telling his story from his point of view, and he got booed down. So if he's an elected official like all the rest of the elected officials, but it didn't matter. He was still a black man. I don't respect you. I ain't got to hear nothing you say. I don't even see you. I don't even see your story. I don't see your. I even had somebody tell me.
He's a black. He's a black man.
Black man.
We were black people that day.
Yes.
In our African
garb.
garb.
Yes.
that day.
That was too much for them Southern white boys. But here's the deal. You know, it's not unusual for us to have to experience that. The fact that they were in a body that is supposed to embody respect and systems and norms. And these fellas went all the way outside of it, so much so to follow another representative and berate a 70-year-old, 60, 70-year-old man in the bathroom. This is what y'all dealing with. The fact that I'm having these kinds of conversations about institutions that are supposed to be in place, that's why it's necessary to have multiple directions that we attack this thing. I'm gonna let Representative Pryor do what Representative Pryor does, because bottom line is somebody needs to be in there having negotiations, right? And she's sitting down having those negotiations in her personality, in her way. I love it. I'm outside being the hurricane. We're gonna stir it up. We're going to bring people to the table. We're going to build coalitions. We're going to build relationships. And I'm going to do this thing on it. You got to attack it from multiple angles. And what drives me crazy, and the reason why I bring that up is because we always think that we all got to walk the same way. We all have to talk the same way as black people. Well, first of all, we multiple tribes from the largest continent on the planet, and we were all dumped together on the cargo ship. And then the boats dropped us off, wherever they dropped us off, and now we're supposed to be all one people. We were never one people. But we have different ideas and different designs on how to get to a place where we're all better. And we have to respect everybody's path, because I'm loud and obnoxious. Nicole is quiet and reserved, you know? So you have to respect everybody's path. And I think that is really important as we talk about what it means to, move our communities forward. Everybody in the community who wants to be involved has a way of doing it. And you have to cultivate that way of doing it.
And so, I'm glad you said moving forward. How do we do so when we have our legislature actively shouting people down when they're trying to tell their story, and we only have 14 people in the room, and you would think that would be enough. Like sometimes you're the only person.
It's 150.
I know, sometimes you're the only person in the room. I've been the only person in the room.
Yeah,
Me too.
Or you've been the only person in the room. You've been the only person.
I've been the only person in the county.
Yes,
I've
so
been the
what
only
do you
person in the
do?
county.
How do you amplify your voice? And let Cherish take it first.
Real talk.
Real talk. Because you can amplify your voice, but let's.
Yeah, and I'm kind of more reserved too.
Yes.
I think in the legislature, the one thing that I will say is they can't take my voice, because I can get up to the mic and speak. You can, we did have 2 legislators that got booed
That's
so
right.
It was 2 that incident. But they can't take my voice, and I can always go up and speak. Now, you may not listen, you may not believe me, but the fact is, I'm going to bring you the knowledge that I have, and I'm going to tell you what I know. So we as legislators have to continue to be a voice for our community and speak up, even if we're the only person in the room. We have to speak up. And we also have to try to make sure that we're continuing to bring other people to that table with us so that we're fighting collectively. The other piece is everybody, we all have our role. Everybody can't be legislators. Everybody can't be like Dana. Everybody can't be like Nicole. But we can all work together because it does take us coming from different facets to make an improvement in our community. So I think part of it is understanding your role and making sure that you are participating in that role and being active and aggressive with it. So if I'm just holding in and hoarding all the information that I have, I'm not helping Dana. The thing is, we have to communicate. You know, if Dana hears something that's going on, hear this noise is going on, we need to know. If I hear something that's going on, and then I need to let people know as well. So we have to work collectively together. And so, you know, people, they could try to quiet me, but, you know, I'm not a big talker. However, I am going to speak my piece. And I'm going to stand up for what I believe in. And as legislators, that's the one thing that we do. And, you know, in working with the people on the outside who are not legislators, and those folks doing protests and writing letters and calling and letting their voices be heard as well, that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. So I want to speak to my people first.
Okay.
An imam out of Indianapolis, I heard him talk about this, and he said, as black folks, we say we want unity, but we really want uniformity. And having uniformity means that if you don't fit into this space, then we're not going to let you in. Well, everybody knows, and Cherish will tell you, you cannot do anything by yourself. So I'm always going to address my people first. Remember to keep an open mind about who you inviting in to the table. You know, don't think that our oppression supersedes anybody else's oppression. Understand that as humans, we are all trying to fight together. Now, that's all I'm gonna say about us, because, you know, we've been doing this for a while. White folk, can I holler at you for a minute? First of all, I'm gonna need some of y'all to sit down, step back, give some space, make some room. When there are opportunities to elevate minority voices, black voices, and even women voices, it is time for you to sit down and take a step back. Your ego is going to be fine. And by the way, ego stands for edging God out for all my Christians, edging God out. Get your ego out of the way. Make space for people, because if we keep recycling the same thing over and over again, isn't that the definition of an insanity and not getting anywhere? So if you don't bring fresh ideas into the conversation, you keep regurgitating the same thing. Look, we all like vanilla ice cream, right? We all like vanilla ice cream. But sometimes you want some chocolate. Oh, I'm just saying, vanilla ice cream all the time on a sugar cone is just going to be, you don't want that. We have to be willing to, you have to get out of the way and know that your thought process, we have learned over the last 4 years, just because you are from European descent and your parents have money and you went to an Ivy League school, you are not necessarily the smartest person in the room. We have seen that play out in politics over the last 4 years. Ted Cruz is an Ivy League graduate, but when push came to shove and the power went out in Texas, he went to Cancun. And he was such a man about it, he blamed his daughters. We have seen people make bad decisions. We've watched the legislators talk about how the insurrection was people walking inside the ropes. It was a tour.
Can't tell them from anybody else.
You can't tell them from anybody. But see, you can't fix stupid. I don't care how many Ivy League schools you send them to. I don't care how much money their mom and daddy's had. You can't fix stupid. So guess what? Why don't we try something different? And let me tell you what black women are doing. We showed it in Alabama. We did it first in Alabama when they were ready to send a pedophile to Washington, D.C. The sisters in Alabama said, no, we won't. We will not have it. You know, when your mama took you to the store and she said, don't y'all embarrass me in here.
Nothing.
Don't you embarrass me. And they said, Alabama, y'all will not embarrass us. And they did not send that pedophile. Now you see what's happening in Georgia. as soon as Stacey Abrams says she likes anything, they so afraid of that sister, they will come out against
it.
They come out against her in a minute. So all I'm saying is elevate black women, because we really running things. Y'all just don't know it yet. Because if we were suckling your kids during slave times, I mean, never mind. We're not going there.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Okay. So I'm just saying, sit down. Get out of the way. You've been running things for 400 years. Don't talk about what we aren't and are not capable of doing. We've gone to wars. We've had famines. We've had pandemics under the leadership of white men. Sit down. Let somebody else take over.
Okay.
That's how I feel about it.
Clearly she has strong feelings about it, right? So I'm really glad to hear you say that, Dana, because one of the things that we were talking about yesterday, and I think it's something that we've been talking about in several conversations in several different places, is about building our bench and making sure that we have a way to bring other people into the conversation. And so, Cherish, I know that you are the newly elected chair or president of Hoosier Women Forward, which is a leadership program for women in the state. And part of it is to make sure that there's a network of women, right, throughout the state. I am,
you're an alum.
Disclosure, I'm a graduate of the inaugural class of Hoosier Women Forward. And one of the things that I love best about the program is that there are women across the state that I can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I need some help with this or that, or I'm just going to be in your town and let's get together for lunch or brunch, as it may be. And I think one of the things that you're talking about, stepping aside, moving, making place for somebody, it's important to actually come into a space with a plan for succession, right? And having women lined up that can do the work or know how to do it is so very important. So
it is.
How are we building our bench with Hoosier Women Forward or other plans in the State House or other places?
I think, Hoosier Women Forward is definitely one organization for women. And I would say, I'm going to put in a plug for I.D.E.C.
Okay.
Indiana Democrat African American Caucus.
Okay.
An organization where people can get involved in the process. And so, we can build our bench through that. And also, we have interns at the House of Representatives, and I've kept in contact with with my interns. So working with them and getting them involved. And I always tell young people, as a legislator, I'm just temporarily holding the spot. I don't own my seat.
Say it again.
I'm just keeping this seat warm for the next person that's going to represent this district. So it's not mine. And so I think young people hearing that, and then young people just seeing another African American, and not thinking, not thinking or knowing that that's something that they can do. That's a big thing. I mean, President Obama was huge, but I think for some young people, it's so big, they don't necessarily think it's something that they can do. They've never met him and probably never will. But I'm just, I go and get my groceries and shop at the same grocery store and everything. So people see me, and my kids come to the state house and I go talk to them. And so, that's that one-on-one connection. So, I think the bench is being built. So it's incumbent on me to not only reach out, but then I'm gonna have to say this. It's also incumbent on young people to want to get involved as well. They have to want to, when I share my information with you and I ask you to get involved. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time doing it, but get involved at some level because it takes both of us. I can't do it alone, and I'm not gonna be doing it forever.
So somebody else has to get started.
Somebody else has to get started.
And we have to jump in.
They have to jump in and start doing the work,
So I'm going to have to jump in here and take a break. And I'm so sorry because we're right at that point. But we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and we're going to come back to Representative Pryor because I like where this is going and I hope you do too. So give us a minute and we'll be right back to you.
Yo, this your boy Miguel, and welcome to Common Conversations. Yeah, that's it. 2020 is behind us. It was crazy. It was all kind of new. And yo, we know how to pivot. This is 2021. Let's get it in. And I want to have you on the show. Come podcast with me. Let's go live. Let's sit down and talk about all the good, the bad, the ugly, the green, the funny. Yo, kind of how we do it. This is Miguel. This is Common Conversations, and I'm inviting you to come tell your story. Let's go.
Indiana's own Dana Black here, and if you're anything like me, you get tired of waiting on the Indiana media to cover the issues that matter to Hoosier liberals, progressives, and Democrats. Our issues and candidates seem to always get ignored. Now, you don't have to wait to hear from left-leaning blue politicians regarding the issues that matter to us. Turn Left is your information source. Join us each Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern on Facebook Live. Turn Left, Indiana politics from the left side of things.
And we're back. And so I have, we were just talking about building the bench, and I want to come back to Representative Pryor to finish your thought, because you were talking about interns and making sure that our young people are actually doing their part in terms of meeting you where you were. So can you come back to that idea, please?
Yes. You know, I think oftentimes I meet young people and tell them about the internships and the various programs, and sometimes it's really hard to get young people to get engaged and want to participate in the process. But we need those young people to be involved and to be engaged, like the young lady that was just here.
Yes.
You know, she had some profound statements, and those type of young people need to be involved and need to be engaged, and we need to hear them and know what they're saying. I mean, they have more information than we will ever know. And so, you know, we're doing what we think is right, but we have to have conversations with these young people and really find out what's going on.
Oh, and it's so hard. I mean, I have interns in my office, and there are times when they'll tell me things, and I'm absolutely flummoxed because I don't know half the things that they know, and they show me how to get on social media and how to research things, and my mind is blown because when I was their age, I was not nearly as connected and involved as they are, and they just take it as a matter of course. But I have to, but to get to them and to get them into my office, I'm working and I'm asking them, hey, can you reach out to your friends and your colleagues and tell me where I need to go next to get them to come in, you know, to my office and to reach out to them. So it's a back and forth. And, you know, by the way, if anybody young is watching today, reach out, you know, because we're always looking for interns in our offices and through our programs.
And they're paid internships.
And they're paid internships. We don't like to have interns in our offices when they're not getting paid. I mean, this is important to us.
But can I jump in real quickly?
Yeah, please do.
You know, we talked about Hoosier Women Forward as a way to build a bench. One of the things about our party, the Democratic Party, is that we didn't hire someone to make our party diverse and inclusive. We have caucuses who have seats at the table to have those conversations. So when she mentioned IDAC, IDAC is a caucus of the party. Stonewall is the LGBTQ plus caucus of the party, but one of the caucuses that speaks to what you guys are talking about is the Indiana Young Democrats.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't, you know, a lot of times some of us who are...
And they have caucuses within.
They have caucuses within their caucus.
Because they're creating leadership opportunities for these folks, right? So these young folks are kicking it with people their own age, because, you know, as cool as the three of us are, right, they may not want to hang out with us. They may want to hang out with people who are more college age or high school young folk. But what they're doing
even
is
in their 20s,
right,
because
20s,
let's be real.
But what they're doing at IYD is creating opportunities for young people to make decisions, to be in decision-making roles at a very young age. Then some of them are going to get right, some of them are going to mess up. But all of those things are learning experiences. So to go back to the intern program, maybe you're a behind-the-scenes person. Maybe you want to be more of an activist. Maybe you want to register voters. Maybe you want to do data. Connect with the Indiana Young Democrats, and they are all over the state making it happen and giving young people an opportunity to be in leadership positions.
Well, and we should also be clear, since this is a nonpartisan
program.
I love the way you said that, Dana, because it was so sincere and heartfelt. You know, I could feel it, you know. But there
For
are...
our interns at the Indiana General Assembly,
Thank
there are
you.
4 caucuses. And I would encourage, and even as the Black Caucus was doing our town halls a year, before COVID happened, we had information for students and told them about the internship programs that were available at the 4 caucuses, and they're all paid. When I say 4 caucuses, that's the House Democrats, the House Senate, the Senate Democrats, and the Senate Republicans. I think I said that right. House Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Republicans, and Senate Democrats. They're all paid. And any young person that's interested in politics, apply for those programs. The application processes, I think, if they're not open, there will be soon. Apply for those programs. Those are great opportunities. As a matter of fact, I was an intern.
The closest I got was a page for Julia Carson when I was 12. That's the closest I ever got.
And the page is another great program too for the high school students.
So there's many ways for young people to get involved, but the other thing is I would suggest is you can be young or you can be young at heart. And I was in my 40s when I began my political activism. And so you don't have to, don't think that you're on some timetable to get involved in civic engagement, right? We're saying this is nonpartisan. Civic engagement, there's so much work to do, when you consider, less than half of Americans vote regularly. That is unacceptable. So if you want to be involved, it doesn't matter how old you are. Yes, we want to have young people, but we can, if you're 35 or 40 and you want to be on the bench, we can make room, because guess what? There's never been an NBA championship team that had all rookies or all veterans. They got to have a little bit of each. You got to have some young people, some prime people, and some veterans to guide it. And so it doesn't matter how long you've been on the planet. If you're new to politics, then you're an emerging leader. So come on and get civically engaged.
There's one other point that I'd like to make, and I think it's something that people tend to miss when they're getting involved and they're starting to get involved with policy and politics and everything else, which is you don't have to be the superstar in the room. And so many people think the only way they have to get involved in politics is to be the person who runs for office, or the person out front, the president of an organization, or the person who's the superstar. And I think Cherish alluded to this earlier when she said, we can't all be like Dana or can't all be like Nicole. No, that's not going to happen. I will never give a speech like Dana Black can give. I wish I could. It's not going to happen.
But see, I probably won't win over constituents like you two do.
Thank you.
Because I'm going to alienate people. I'm going to offend people just because I'm raw like that. But you guys are...
what you can do...
is be quiet.
...is get in the room and do the work. And sometimes you can move something forward just by getting in there, and you will have the satisfaction of knowing that you have done something amazing without actually having to, kind of be out in the front. So sometimes it takes everybody, and it takes a full team, and everybody can work together.
And during the struggle, the civil rights movement, every struggle that we've had as a people, it's taken people from every aspect to get it done. It has never been one person doing the work. It's always been a collective group of people, a bunch of people, unsung heroes.
Absolutely.
Who have
Every
done
time.
a lot of work.
And mostly black women.
Black women. and
Didn't they make a movie about that?
Hidden Figures.
Come on.
And you would never know their names. And most of them because we tend not to brag about ourselves, and you know, we do the work because it just needs to be done.
Yeah.
A lot of it will never be known to people. A lot of people never even tell their kids or their grandkids even about their struggle or the things that they've done. So for our community, you know, it's just everybody knowing that they have a role and doing the work in that role that they are given.
Yes, and teaching everybody who comes along, this is where you can fit in, and making sure you know your strengths and how you can actually help our community, because that's what it comes down to, right?
Yep.
It's about our community. So, speaking of community and the things that we've been going through over the last year, because it has been, well, let's be real, it's not just the last year. It's not new. It's just been,
Shine a light on it.
it's just been more public. And
The wool came off the cover.
yeah,
Yep,
you
that's
know,
it, that's it.
it's just been more public, and we've seen it a lot more in the media. So we've been talking about the police a lot over the last year, and we've seen it a lot more in our legislature and in our laws. And so there was a police reform bill that was recently passed. And who would like to take a crack at it first? You?
So this year, in a bipartisan effort, in the House Bill 1006, that actually got support from the police unions. Now, I can't say that every police officer agreed with it, but the police unions, the prosecutors, the public defenders, but a wide spectrum, a coalition of people agreed to House Bill 1006. In that bill, it bans chokeholds under certain conditions. It will require that if a police officer leaves one jurisdiction and goes to another, their police records have to go with them. So that is a huge piece of that, and it also requires body cameras as well. So those were huge things, and particularly I would say, you know, the chokehold. Obviously, we would have wanted a ban, but what the definition of a chokehold is now, though, it's considered as a deadly force. So it is on the same line as using a gun. So, you know, if an officer puts a chokehold on someone, that's considered deadly force. So that was significant change in the definition. So we really needed that. Obviously, the Black Caucus, we had over 50 bills dealing with police reform that we wanted to get through. Unfortunately, some of those did not, but we did get a significant piece of legislation in House Bill 1006, and those provisions were significant pieces in the police reform.
And that bill wasn't just significant because of that bill standing alone. Obviously, standing alone, it is a good bill, but what you have to do is juxtapose that against some of the other bills that were making their way through the State House that fortunately died. You know, the city of Indianapolis, the largest city in the state, you know, saw a lot of, you know, different situations and scenarios during the protest season of last year. And as the FOP was supporting that particular bill, they were also supporting a bill to allow the state to take over local law enforcement. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when have y'all ever known a state to take over a municipal law enforcement agency? That doesn't happen. And so that's why the bill is so significant, is that you had another bill, there were other bills out there saying,
Several.
you know, saying that we want the state we're going to take away, and what they were doing is taking away the vote, but
And I have a question about that bill. Was that bill just directed at Indianapolis, or was that for all municipalities?
It was just Indianapolis.
Just Indianapolis. Yes, they write
so
those bills so that they say unified government. So Indianapolis is the only unified government.
Okay.
And so what they had, you had a senator from Hamilton County and one from Indianapolis. They got together, they wrote the Senate bill. It had the FOP support, and the bill was going to turn over local municipal government or law enforcement to a 5-person appointed by the governor and just the people up there to manage IMPD. There's so many things wrong with that, especially when you consider that Republicans believe in home rule. Well, you just stripped home rule. The other thing is that they literally were negating the votes of the 600,000 Indianapolis residents that voted overwhelmingly for 70% for the mayor of that city. And oh, by the way, they also have a supermajority in the city, on the city county council. So basically, they're saying, well, y'all don't know what y'all doing in Indianapolis. Y'all don't know how to vote. So we're gonna take your vote away, and we're gonna take over this thing that you voted for these people to do for you. I mean, and it was just really bad. So that's why that bill was so significant, because they had all these other bills that were really detrimental to our community coming right beside it. So I applaud everybody, and I wrote about that. I applaud that bill. It's not a solution. Let's be clear. It's not a solution.
Not a solution.
It is a
One
step in the right direction, and I'm grateful for that.
But you know what Dana mentioned that particular bill about the police department. But what happens in Indianapolis is when we do stuff in Indianapolis that somebody doesn't like, then we see a bill, and that's pretty much what happened. Our police we were changing our general ordinances and a bunch of the rules and things dealing with the police department. And some people did not like that. And because they did not like that, they went to some of their legislative friends and asked their legislative friends to do something about it. And so the something about it was that we're going to have the governor take over the police department.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't even end there. It also goes down to our prosecutors, because we also had a bill where the attorney general would be able to come in and prosecute cases that our local prosecutor didn't prosecute.
And see, we talk about criminal.
That's not unique to Indianapolis, because that happened in Bloomington as well a few years ago when we started an annexation, and somebody did not like that, and they changed. But
we are always fighting Bloomington, that annexation. I served on local government, and oh my God.
Yes, but I mean, Bloomington ended up suing, and we won our lawsuit. So now we're moving forward with the annexation. Now, we've restarted the process, and hopefully it will be completed over the course of this year. But we'll see what happens. Yes, Dana, you are chomping at the bit. I can see that you're like, I want to finish the thought.
Because we talked about how we move forward. First of all, we have got to get rid of that supermajority at our state house, and here's why. In the city of Indianapolis, we said we wanted to address criminal justice reform. So you had a city county council that was writing ordinances to adjust for that. You have a prosecutor from the court side that's saying we're going to address it and we're going to change that. But in order for what people don't understand, while we're paying attention to the federal level, all of the power is at the state house. So the state house can determine what federal legislation comes down, i.e., did we all get expanded Medicare when Obamacare passed? No, we got HIP 2 point something or another. 2.0. Right? So we didn't really get all of that. So they stopped the federal stuff from coming down.
Don't forget about the unemployment benefits.
Right, they're canceling unemployment. But then on the other end, the state house said, Indianapolis, you will not have at-large council seats. So they eliminated at-large council seats. Marion County, you will not vote for your judges. So the state house actually has more control than people imagine. And so as you're talking about, your city, your county may be addressing criminal justice reform, but if you're not paying attention to who is writing legislation and policies in the state house, everything that these municipalities are doing can be stripped away. And that's why it is so important that we all get involved every day, and not just every 4 years when there's a presidential election. Every year there's election, every three out of 4 years there's election in Indiana. 2 statewide years, and then 1 municipal race year, but there's a whole bunch of stuff smattered in there.
Well, it's not just those elections, it's also following up on what they're doing with every bill.
Absolutely.
And following up and paying attention.
And you can't follow every bill. So you get a group of buddies and y'all divide all 100 of them up, and then, that you become your own lobby. You become your own lobby. You get your homegirls, you after your book club, you get through reading your book, go look at bills.
Yeah.
Well, maybe rather than a book club, a legislative club.
Let's do it.
That sounds like a great idea.
I think it is.
And the one thing I will say is the counties that's controlled by Republicans really don't have to worry about all of this stuff that we're talking about,
No.
control being taken away. It's really the counties where there has been a significant Democrat control, where you have to, where we're concerned about. For instance, with the judges, 92 counties, but out of the top 5 counties, population, that has a different way of getting their judges, I will say.
Yep.
4 of them, mostly Democrat, 1 Republican. The 4 that are Democrat, they don't have a direct election for their judges. Hamilton County, one of the largest, I think the
Directly
4th
elects.
largest, directly elects. That is a problem. And it's not just, you know what? And it's not even just Democrat. I'm going to have to say that. Those counties have a significant African American population as well. So why is it that the counties that have a significant African American population
Are not able to
are
directly
not
elect
able
their
to
judges.
directly elect their
Really?
judges?
Yeah.
So, you know, that is a problem. And I know that Lake County is filed a lawsuit because we just changed again how they're going to get their judges. So, you know, we have a problem in the state, in this country, when it comes to race, and things being covered up as, well, this process is better, you know, we need to have a change of times or whatever. No, you know, if we're going to have a process, some things need to be uniform.
Come on.
How we elect judges should be uniform.
But we need to be able to name it.
The same thing with school systems.
And people need to be able to point it out. And it's the same thing with
Yes.
school
Same
systems
things with
and
school
everything
system,
else.
how
Yes.
they take over. You know, there's not a public high school in Gary, Indiana. They're all charter schools or some
taking
vouchers. The idea that there's no...
And they're not doing any better.
They're not doing any
And
better.
so we have spent millions of dollars
Yep.
on these takeover management companies, and their performance of those schools are no better than what they were before. What they have done is isolated the parents and the communities from the schools, so the community has no input now.
And so there's more than one way to silence the black vote. It ain't just, you know, the police come and harass you and locking you up. They can literally write into legislation to disenfranchise you even after you voted. So you went, stood in line, cast your vote. It don't even matter. They will come in and write legislation. That's why it's so important. People say I'm not down with politics. Everything you do is about politics. You can't even buy a carton of milk that doesn't have a policy attached to it. So
You're right.
they have a way of disenfranchising you when you're not paying attention.
So y'all, I'm so sorry because we are out of time, and I want to sit and talk to you for like the next 5 hours, and we don't have to, well, we can, but we can't do it here. So you don't have to go home,
but you gotta
know.
get out of here.
So anyway, I want to thank y'all for coming and having this conversation, and thank you, Miguel, for inviting us here. And
Great job, Miguel.
we're going to wrap it up, but thank you again, Representative Pryor and Ms. Dana Black, and we're going to go to commercial, and we're going to have our next segment up. And I have no idea what just happened there. And y'all have a good afternoon. Take care.
Peace.
My name's Elise Owens. I'm ready to tip over Pandora's box. I'm ready to unwind the intertwined snakes trapped inside the vines. I am truly ready for the masquerade mask to finally fall and for the truth to drop the camouflage. Living our truth is absolute chaos and destruction to them. But then again, who really likes consequences? Who really likes to have the finger being pointed at them? Who really likes to have to clean up the mess that they made? Nobody. But who really needs consequences? Who really needs to be held accountable? Anyone and everyone. We've seen what happens when one isn't. So when we as a community, a coterie, a faction, start to break away from a system that never welcomed us, a system that never intended for our stay to be joyful and easy, keep in mind that we received everything but that. Just like in the great game of Jenga, when that one distinct piece is removed, it all comes tumbling down. Once we all come to a consensus as a community and realize that we as a community are that one distinct and sacred piece, and realize that the game comes tumbling down without us, we can finally rebuild our own game with our own rules. Now, our first few rounds were paused by massacres, assassinations, and drownings. But we're on the come up. We're on the rebound. The ball is in our court. The scent of silent compliance has grown quite spoiled and stale. The smell of fear has a very unique and distinct scent, which can easily be confused with the notion of minding one's business or choosing not to be argumentative. But as long as we stand with nose plugs in, we can't be surprised when we finally smell what they're cooking up this whole time. Unplug yourself. I'm willing to reopen and to plunge into my most deepest and most painful wounds. I'll go so deep that I'll plant new knowledge and new sorrow, and watch it bloom and resonate into something so beauteous and captivating, almost surreal-like. My people's pain has once again become entertainment and exciting to many. A hashtag, a repost, a trend, a constant battle to prove that our lives matter. This is not a Halloween costume. I cannot take my blackness off when it's not convenient to me. This right here is the true R.I.D.E. This right here is the only rep that I said. This is a part of me. They'll keep poking and poking at our wounds, and they'll proceed to act surprised when we react and call us irrational. Hoping to see defeat on our tired faces. Hoping to see the white flag waving in alliance. Hoping to prevail over our tired hearts and tired souls. We'll leave them in despair and despondency. Giving up and giving in has never been our forte. Enduring and prevailing has always been our taste, a bittersweet taste really. Tart-like with sweet notes and tail. Moving forward, as we begin to drop the shackles and the leg irons impressed in our minds, as we begin to get up and dust ourselves off from being under Uncle Tom's boot for far too long, we will become drenched in the smell of triumph victory. Don't worry, I've gotten a whiff of it. It smells divine. You'll love it. Moving forward, as long as we keep our minds and our hearts clear and our eyes envision with the ending goal, we will be there in Fort Worth and arrive with gratitude and joy. Finally getting to wipe the sweat from our foreheads and rest. But not for too long, of course. There's so much work to do. Moving forward, we will rise and blossom once again. This is per usual for us. You may have thought you had us, but you never did. You may have thought that you had outsmarted us. But at this game, we are the grand masters. Moving forward, we will rise. Moving forward, we will blossom. Moving forward, we will conquer. Once again and once and for all.
2, 1.
Welcome back. This is your boy Miguel, and this is Common Convo. And I hope y'all really enjoyed the discussion with Nicole, Dana, and Cherish. I hope it was really enlightening and you take some things away from it. I seem to have lost my glasses and my hat. I think it has to do with the fact that it's hot outside and it apparently is hot in here. But hey, I have a really cool two sets of great local leaders first. Elected officials second. If they'll allow me to say that, they can, interject here in just a minute when we put the camera on them. Who, again, decided to step up when I said, hey, who's willing to take the call to this brave situation? Let's have a brave conversation. Let's talk about race, equity, and equality in our community specifically. And so we have Mayor Dr. Treva Hodges, or is it Mayor? I like Mayor Doctor better. So we're gonna run with Mayor Doctor. And then we've got attorney, city councilman, District 1, Dustin T. White. Made me emphasize the T, good people. And that's okay, because, we have to own our names. And my man said, boy, what does T mean?
Well, if we're in Hungary, it means Takelatesh.
Okay.
But we're not, so it just means Tyrone.
All right, there it is. Tyrone, okay. It's all about you. Well, look, we're going to have some fun, and we're going to be serious, because I don't know any other way. I am going to be a little more PG than PG-13 or rated R. But again, this is a brave conversation. And here's a question. when we're talking about racism, we're talking about equity, we're talking about equality, we all have a voice. And I said this in segment two yesterday, you know, when we're looking at the cost that we all face as a community, whether it's financial, whether it's political, whether it's social, it doesn't matter, there's a cost, and we're all paying for it, whether you're white, black, green, yellow, orange, it doesn't really matter. And if we continue to avoid the conversation, then we will avoid the change that is necessary for us all to thrive. And the other thing is that you heard this in the last session, you know, we have to stop looking at a national position, and we have to start looking at a local position. You know, what can we do as citizens and voters? And what can our elected officials do as councilmen, councilwomen? Is there a feminine, masculine thing for mayor?
I would hope not. It'd just be mayor. But
I think mayor's probably non-binary.
Yeah,
All
it's
right,
probably
there it is.
non-binary.
And again, this is an unscripted conversation. So if you don't know something, ask something. There's no right or wrong as we engage this. These are the political gurus. I'm just the guy who gets to sit in the camera and act like an ass sometimes. So, and to start this out and to break this, I'm gonna start with Dr. Treva. Or do you want me to call you Mayor Treva?
You can just call me Treva. It's fine.
We're gonna call her Treva. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And then we're going to jump into this with I might throw a crazy or easy question to start.
A crazy or easy. All right. Well, first off, I have to issue apologies if I have to cough or whatever. I guess it's my first time experiencing allergies, so I've got something weird going on with my voice, and decided
Call
to.
it the Indiana code.
You know, whatever it is, it's decided to land on me this week, and so I thought it's safer to mask up just to be safe and respectful. So, it's hard to talk about myself when I'm with great people, but I just want to say thank you, Miguel, for including me in the conversation, inviting me to this, because it's fun to be a part of. I never walk away knowing less than I did when I walked in, and I think that's going to be great. And so just to let people know who I am, so I moved to Indiana in 2013 from Alabama. Lived in several places throughout my life, but Alabama was kind of the one where I spent the most time. I had a career in academia, been teaching in the colleges and universities for about a decade, and then just fell in love with Charlestown, fell in love with Southern Indiana. I'm so glad I came here. The people here are phenomenal. The landscape is beautiful, and I think we have just a great opportunity. And I got frustrated with things that were going on politically in my city. And the more I complained about it, the more my husband said, well, what are you going to do about it? And I just complained more and blogged a little. And then one night about 2 a.m. when I wouldn't shut up, he raised up and pulled his CPAP off and said, you either need to run for mayor or something, but go to sleep. And so I said, okay, I'll run for mayor. I'll throw my hat in. And I looked at it as an opportunity to put someone in the position who had never been in the position before. So I didn't think about it right off, but somewhere along the way, someone pointed out that I was the first female mayor in Clark County.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I don't want to ever be the last.
That's right.
And I looked at it as an opportunity to bridge divides in the community, and from somebody who lived a long time outside of there, but has a great appreciation for Charlestown and Southern Indiana, to say, okay, how do we enrich it? How can I bring more voices to the table? And how can I diversify the people who are sitting around the table making decisions? And so it's been very rewarding, and I'm glad to be here. I'm happy to be a part of this.
I'm glad you're here, and we're going to talk more. Councilman, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, like Treva, you never know where to start when you're told to do that. I'm the city councilman for the 1st District in downtown Jeffersonville. Attorney, trial attorney. I've been doing that for about 13 years now. Born and raised here. And I've always set as my goal is to work in a field or to do, and whatever I'm doing is to make sure I'm doing something to help enhance the area where I am. So that's kind of my foundational goal with what I do in life. And I love to travel, so.
There it is. So, easy question.
I thought you were going to go crazy.
I think I'm going to ease my way
Okay,
into
all right.
But y'all can go crazy if y'all decide to. So what is the racial makeup of your communities? Who wants to take that first? Like, just, you don't have to be accurate, but roundabout.
Well, I think Clark County has a 13% African American community.
Yeah.
and that's with around 100,000 plus people. I don't know the breakdown of the other minorities, but I think that the African American population is the largest minority in Clark County. I believe the Latino community is close to that number. But in my district, we have, it's a very diverse district. I don't know the percentages of the makeup, but it's the downtown Jeffersonville area. So we have a good mix of the world in my district.
Okay, so we got a collection, a collective.
Yeah.
Of faces and colors and people, sizes.
A little more homogenous in Charlestown.
Okay.
A lot more homogenous. So we're somewhere around like 97, 98% white.
Okay.
And I believe the African American population is somewhere around 6%ish. And we actually have a little bit higher Hispanic Latino population than we do African Americans in Charlestown. I've noticed that, because I look for these things, right? I look and I want to see, who's around and what's around. And I do believe we have a variety of some folks coming from refugee, places that have been settled for a while. And so that's, we have some international folks that have settled and everything. And so I think it's a lot more different than it used to be.
Okay.
Just talking to people from the past. But yeah, still very, very, very white.
So very white, but you've got a base and a collection of folks that are coming in, and it's growing potentially.
Yeah.
So what's the current racial climate? If I can be that vague and broad with it, right? In each of your communities. I mean, there's been a lot going on countrywide, right? Mm-hmm. So of course we have the pandemic. Everybody likes to talk about that. So I'll preface it. You all have access to resources as it relates to the pandemic. Have you seen a racial division? Like a lot of folks are saying, well, this part of the community didn't get this part of the community didn't get that. On top of that, we have, we're right across the river. You're a little further than right across the river from Louisville and the shooting and killing of Breonna Taylor. But even in Jeffersonville, we had a shooting with Malcolm Milky Williams. And I know that was not an unarmed shooting, but there was some conflict there. So as we come out of this pandemic, how are you seeing the racial climate in your communities?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. So Charlestown is peaceful in that sense. I mean, I guess, it's quiet. We didn't have any protests. We didn't have anything like that. And I think there's good there in the sense that if you ask us if you ask anybody on the streets in Charlestown, do you think there's a race problem in Charlestown? I bet you 99.9% of the people are going to say absolutely not, right? But then I have to ask, well, is it because we're just not talking about race? Are we just not having the conversation at all? Because if you are a racial minority and you're living in Charlestown, what is your experience, right? And I don't think it's fair to take what's going on in another community and transplant that into my city and say, well, this is necessarily going to happen here. But I just don't think there's a lot of open conversation that goes on. And I know when Breonna Taylor died and was murdered and every, Louisville was having a lot of problems. There were some, I follow social media. No one said anything to me directly, but I follow social media, and there seemed to be this kind of fear of, well, don't bring that here. Don't bring the problem here. And I thought, well, you're pretending like there's not a problem. I'm not saying the problem looks the same, but if we just don't talk about whether or not there's a problem, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so we did have some other folks reach out and, want to have like a unity night. Of course, then there was COVID, and it was hard to get people committed to doing anything. So we tried to schedule something, and then speakers and stuff were like, I just don't feel comfortable doing this because of COVID, so we canceled it. And then there were people who were like, well, they canceled it because of race. And it's like, no, we canceled it because of COVID, because there's a pandemic. And so, we've had some conversations, and I've heard people talking about, well, I've heard an African-American man say, well, I moved here and I thought, it was crazy that I would be moving here, to Charlestown. What are you doing to me, bringing me here? And he's like, but I don't experience any problems. I fit in well in the community. People love me here. I don't feel out of sorts. But then I've talked to other African Americans in my community one-on-one who have said, you know what, there are some problems, and we're not talking about it. And you got to look at who's being promoted, and you got to look at who, look at what African Americans in your community are being celebrated for.
Okay.
And if there's a script, whatever that script looks like, and they're following the script, then maybe there's not a problem. But if somebody doesn't follow the script, would there be a problem?
So if people were in their place,
right,
staying in their place.
Right.
It's kind of, we talked about that yesterday in terms of African Americans learning how to. There's a training
right.
in terms of dealing with white folks or being in all white communities when you're the only one. So you're saying if they follow that path, there's
right.
no issue. But if they were to leave that path just a little bit, then we may have something we have to talk about.
Right, and I think it's worth having the conversations because, you may not have noticed, but I'm white, and so, I don't have the same experiences, right? And so I'm not going to project an experience onto someone just because of their race, but I think it's worth opening the door and listening. So, but when you talk to people, there's this thread of, well, we don't have a problem. You'll read a Courier Journal article from the plant when the ammunition plant was in the works that says, oh, they had segregated bathrooms and stuff. But then you talk to someone who worked at the plant. I talked to an African-American woman who worked at the plant, and she said, no, that wasn't true. We had integrated Little League before it was mandated. We had integrated play, like it wasn't, talk to the folks who lived there back in the 50s and 60s, they're like, it wasn't like that, right? One woman said to me, I didn't even know I was black until I went to work in Louisville. But the critical scholar in me says, okay, but is there a problem with that?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it okay to recognize that you're black? Like, isn't it okay?
I think so, yes.
Right?
It's unavoidable.
Right? Like, I don't know that's, I'm not trying to make her feel like it's a problem, because if it wasn't a problem for her, that's her experience. But at the same time, can't we have the conversations to say that it's okay to recognize?
How did that happen?
Yeah, why? Why didn't you know you were black? And it's not because I want her to have experienced racism to know she was black. That's not the answer. But isn't it okay to celebrate who you are?
And that might be the question, right? So that might be the problem,
right?
Or the opportunity,
right?
Right. If you're saying, hey, we're a predominantly white community, and our small minority group, there's no identity, right? One, we don't teach it. There's no history there. So we've done a great job of hiding, right, what this conversation is today about racism, inclusion, and diversity. And you kind of said it, if folks stay in their lane, then there's a safe road and you can walk that path. But if there ain't, then maybe there's an issue. That's interesting. Thank you. Dustin, what do you think?
Well, first let me say that there clearly was probable cause to arrest officers Cosgrove and Mattingly for the murder of Breonna Taylor. It's unfortunate that the Attorney General of Kentucky didn't charge that. But staying in your lane, that's a very interesting thing. When I came back from Europe, I went down to City Hall and asked the Mayor Galligan if he would hire me as his deputy mayor. He said, well, we're not going to have a deputy mayor, but you can be the assistant mayor. So, for whatever that was worth. But it was an opportunity. I took it and enjoyed it. Again, an opportunity to work within government and try to help the community where I was born. But over time, there's this African-American lawyer who's working on the 4th floor at the time at City Hall, and he used to always say to me that you're a threat. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, a threat to who? Like, I don't want to do anything to anybody. Like, I want to make sure the roads are properly paved and garbage is picked up at the right time. And what ideas could you bring that maybe I've seen somewhere else that we could bring to Jeffersonville and make it a better place to live? That's my goal. I don't have any issues with anybody. But as I got older and as more and more conversations took place about race, I realized what he meant by that. When you have an educated black man that comes in and for whatever reason, people are threatened. And I still don't know why they're threatened, but it's on them. But it's something that probably should be talked about more because there's no reason for it.
Fear of an educated black man. It's interesting because, I have a lot of opinion. We're going to talk about this a little bit. Because as an educated black man who's not from this area, I get a lot of that. And I've heard you're not from here, you need to know your place, you need to stay in your lane. I've heard a lot. I've had people even tell me, like, when I first got here and I was looking for a job and I was young and I was accustomed to making 6 figures and You know, I had people tell me to take my experience off my resume and lie so that I would get an opportunity. And I said, how ass backwards is that? So where's the fear that you have educated black men in your community, right? So it's okay if you have an uneducated police officer who maybe only has a GED, right? But it's not okay to hire educated black men at a higher level because that's scary. Yeah, that's something that we really got to unpack. For me, that's systemic racism, right? Because that's taught, right? We talked, you know, it was interesting because Tim Finley was here yesterday, and he was talking about he lives out in a certain part of Louisville, which is fairly nice, middle class, great. You know, he lives alone, 2 big dogs, yada yada yada. Walks the neighborhood. And he said the guy who cuts his grass, you know, they were having a conversation. He said, you know, how often do you engage with your neighbors? He was like, really not all that often. They don't talk to him. And they said, yeah, because they think you're a drug dealer. So, you know, it's you know, here we are, right? So you have an educated black man who's doing well for himself, and the first thought process when you see them, it's like, you can't be smart, you can't be a great businessman, you're a drug dealer, right? And we faced that here. It was funny because I was at a bank one time, and I had the bank officer ask me if I sold drugs.
Oh, wow.
Right, and my office is on 10th Street. So I'm like, no, I do marketing and PR. I'm sorry that success is for black people are only allowed to be drug dealers. But so bringing that into that conversation, right? Because these are kind of covert things that we have to deal with.
Right.
How do we overcome that? Can we? Is this a question? Is this something that? Yeah, is there something that we can have in it? Is there an answer for that?
Well, you just got to keep pushing. I mean, despite his wishes, I'm now on the city council.
Let's get it.
So, and that was not without pushing back and overcoming the effort from my own party to not let me be on the city council. So you just have to keep pushing and working and to overcome it. Because there are people, the residents, the citizens, we are slowly getting past that. And we have proven that, at least politically in my district, twice.
So how do we set a tone? So, okay, let me do it this way. So for someone like you and me, let's say we're a rarity in this environment. We can overcome.
Well, let me kind of hold that thought. And I will also say, we have the first mayor in Charlestown. So yes. This is centered around racism, but there's also the sexism that's clear and prevalent. So it's different words, but the same actions to try to keep you down, right?
Oh yeah. When I'm hearing you say, that you're out of place, right, because of your race and your intellect, an educated woman who seeks to rise to, some kind of political power or come into a political office is often labeled with a different kind of B word, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because we, I can empathize with you. I haven't walked in those particular shoes, but when I'm hearing you tell your experience, I have other experiences that I can relate to that I think, okay.
You've had to fight through.
Yes, Miguel, you use this phrase "from here."
Yeah.
And I have to unpack "from here" for a minute because "from here" drives me up the wall. Can we just go right on front and talk about what does it even mean to be from here? We are sitting on colonized ground. We are sitting on colonized ground. This area had thriving populations and people who were not white Europeans, who were not African Americans, who were not Latinos or Hispanics. There were indigenous folks here before we were here. And so what does it even mean to be from here? How long do I have to live in Charlestown before someone says, I'm from Charlestown? What do I have to do? I have given up a career for my city because I believe in doing good things. I stepped off a career in academia to come into this. I gave up the chance of getting tenure to come into this. I took a pay cut to come into this, okay? Because I believe so strongly in my community. I love my community. So what does it mean to be from here? How long have you been here, right? Well, none of us have been here long enough to say that. So I think if you live here and you love your community, you can say you're from here. So let's go back to the conversation, but I had to steal that for a moment because when you said that, I was like, okay, let's say that we love our communities.
Yeah.
So we are from here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing to use, right? So, you know, first of all, you have overt and you have covert racism. And yes, we have a gender issue as well. And I think what would be interesting and good to know is that if we could get a black woman and a white woman on the panel as we're talking about racism or the struggles, right? Because I think there's two different conversations that have to be had there as well. And not to take anything away from the struggle that white women face as it relates to white men. You know, when you look at the construct of racism, white women still have a control and a power position other than black men and black women.
Right.
And when you look at the makeup of this community, it is predominantly white male and white woman run, right? And so when you look at the growth in education or you look at the growth in business in our community, you don't see a lot of black women or black men in higher positions, right? You don't see a lot of Hispanic or Latino women and men in higher positions. So, you know, is that a systemic issue, or is that just the nature of this area because they're not from here and so they have to stay in their lane and know their place? I've experienced way too much of both overt and covert racism to say that it doesn't exist here, right? You and the three of us are unique in the sense that we can overcome the struggle and the challenges that we face in this place. But as leaders, what do we do for the young women that were in my chair earlier who were talking about the systemic racism that they're already having to face living here, right? And that they lack a hope that it can change, right? And so if we don't peel back the layers and really look at it, where do we go?
Well, I'll take you back to high school. I remember I had the assistant principal, Larry Sigler, pull me out of my physics class to come down to the office to tell me that my leadership skills have waned over the years. He no longer sees me as a leader in the high school.
Okay.
That's it.
That was his only...
Took me out of class to tell me that. Wanted to let me know that.
Was that supposed to be encouraging
Yeah,
for
well,
you
like, what's
or
the point?
discouraging
I don't
for
know.
you?
All I can do is tell you the
A
experiences I've had.
reprimand? Like, what was that meant to be?
But
Also,
this
my
is
senior
because you were a
year-
threat. Let's keep that in mind, right? There's a threat. You're an educated black man. Apparently, you were
Also, my senior year, I was accepted to Wabash College.
Okay.
And but it was me and two other Caucasian males. Then we were all three brought out of our classes by a counselor who wasn't even my counselor to say we might want to reconsider going to Wabash College.
Yeah.
Because we would be sitting in classrooms with people who had higher scores than us. I was already accepted.
Okay.
So to answer your question is, my response to both of those instances was, that's your problem.
Yeah.
I'm on my path,
Yes.
and I'm getting ready to go.
Got you.
So you know, regardless of the barriers that are there, you have to keep pushing, go over them, around them, through them,
Okay.
and get that education, and then chart your path. Now, I've made many plans. My mom used to always tell me, have 5 options at the end of the day, so you can pick one. Don't just lay all your eggs in one basket, in other words.
So does education overcome the struggle of systemic racism? So education of a black man and a black woman, white woman too, overcome the challenges that we face in this country?
It helps.
How?
I mean, it's bit by bit, right? So every African American who graduates from Wabash and law school, that's one more than those who don't want, those who participate in the systemic racism. That's one more than they want. So the more of the educated African American and the more educated women that are out there, the more we become the norm.
Yeah, and normalize.
So then as you're existing and working and growing, then you slowly break down the system. You have panel discussions with the first mayor of Charlestown, city councilman,
Okay.
and a marketing guru.
Okay. So education is a step to overcoming the challenges of systemic racism. That's what we're saying. So hypothetically, no, not even hypothetically, let's say, so 2 years ago, I did an interview for a particular college. because I wanted to teach there. And it was a management curriculum. And in that curriculum, it said that the terminology of CEO is the more popular term, and we will no longer use slave master because it's not relevant, the term. Then it said we're going to call our employees and no longer slaves because it's no longer relevant. In my eyes, this would be a lesson in white supremacy, right? Still systemic slavery, and we're teaching this at a collegiate level. If we are sending white people to these institutions to be educated, to get degrees, law degrees, whatever they're getting, and we're sending black people to these to the same institutions to get educated, the flaw and the disparity in what is being delivered in the lessons, how does the education help you surpass not white supremacy, but systemic racism, when it's actually in part of the education platform?
Well, I think having that other voice there helps correct that teaching.
Okay.
I mean, my educational experience was one of free thought. So you may have somebody present that kind of scenario, but then you have the diverse minds in the room that help dissect it.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and dig a little deeper. On June 17th and 18th, we are inviting you to face a common conversation about race, inclusion, diversity, equity, and the impact systemic racism has had on white and BIPOC communities. Our esteemed group of panelists include Indiana's own Dana Black, Charlestown Mayor Treva Hodges, State Representative Cherish Pryor, and Louisville's own Tim Finley Jr., and a host of other influential community leaders. Join us as we embark upon brave and necessary conversations about the move forward.
Start it up. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, so we're back. All right, so we were talking about how racism can be overcome by the challenges, by the opportunity of education. And Dustin said that as we approach this, one of the ways out is through education, right? And, I'm gonna agree and disagree. But that being said, critical race theory, because, Mayor mentioned it, it's been part of the conversation. The kids said something about it. The youth said something about it earlier today. Tim and Chad brought it up. What are your thoughts?
Well, okay, so let me preface this by reminding you that you're talking to someone who has a humanities background with a women and gender studies, and public history focus. and a rhetoric and public address. So, one, I think education can be a way out, but I think we have to make sure that the education that we're giving is constantly assessed to make sure that we're highlighting voices and historic voices that we haven't listened to before. And we certainly have to keep the legislature out of education. We cannot have government coming in and saying, oh, well, no, you can't teach that, right? I mean, it has to be a free expression of ideas and thoughts. And so when I see, tendencies for people to start saying, well, we're going to ban critical race theory, I'm like, hold up, why don't you want to talk about race? What, I think that, and this is my soapbox, I guess, when it comes to education, is that we cannot overlook the importance of the humanities. For so long, there's been a focus in our history on STEM, right? We need science, technology, engineering, mechanics. No. Well, if you don't think each one of those has a history and has its own ethics and philosophy and everything else, we have to include the humanities. We are humans. We have to include humanity. How do we get here? And what does it mean to be here? And all of those types of things. And so you've got to keep government out of, I've worn both hats. I've been a professor and now I'm a government official. You got to keep government out of education. In that respect, you should not be dictating what they're teaching.
So my degree from Wabash was in philosophy.
Yes.
And so I pride myself on that. Whenever somebody asks me, what am I going to do with it? I'm like, philosophy was the root of every discipline.
Thank you. How does your humanities degree qualify you for being mayor? Well, one thing we studied was ethics.
Right.
So, and we know some of our mayors are unethical, and we know that racism has still been here, even in that process, and we are damn near in the South. So,
but we're not.
But we're not. You're right. And so slavery here was illegal, but it was still tolerated.
But it was illegal, but there was a whole lot of white folks fighting really hard to make it legal. I mean, it's not like it was just, there's not some magic line at the Ohio River that says, oh, Indiana has been it's not racist here because we outlawed slavery. Oh, but you didn't think there were fights along the way? We cannot lose sight of those histories.
Okay. And I appreciate that because Teah said it, yesterday, our future has a past. Taking critical race theory, right? We had our youth talk about the flaws and the disparities that they faced in our school systems, right? Specifically with, whether it be teachers, whether it's be institutions, right? So we're applying that. We have businesses in this community, right? So if I was to say, as elected officials, do you know the makeup of both the minority and I guess white-owned businesses in the community? And when you look at contracting, because one of the conversations that Angelique and I had yesterday was about wealth, right? The wealth gap, and Tim and Chad brought it up yesterday as well. And we know that one of the things that we face in this community based on Purdue studies, as well as the state, is that most of the contracts that go out are not being equally contributed to Black-owned and Hispanic-owned companies. And they've even gone as far to say that it's based on stereotype in some cases, not any real data to the reason that that's not happening. In our communities, as elected officials, are you witnessing or have you witnessed a fair or unfair procurement process?
I think ours is fair. I'm not intimately involved with it, but when we have a call for proposals, it's public. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how many minority-owned engineering firms or street construction type firms that are around that bid on these projects. So,
do you look for them? Does the institution of our government look for them?
The call for proposals is public, so no, there's not a let me see which ones exist.
Okay. So for our listeners, what does that mean? It's a public call. Where does it go out?
So if somebody's in the business of public contracting, they are in tune with where those calls will come out.
Right. So where does the city of Jeff put it?
I said, I'm not intimately involved with it.
Okay.
So
I can't speak from I want to build on this, but from a different perspective and talk about employment.
Okay.
Right, because it's a very similar thing. Okay. It's easy to sit back and say, well, we don't have any or we don't have many racial minorities working for a specific community in southern Indiana. Well, that's because our population is made up. But when we put the call out and we put on there the standard language, women and minorities encouraged to apply,
Yes.
because this is in all of our employment stuff. We're not at a point, I don't think, where a lot of women and minorities look at that and say, yes, I feel comfortable applying for that.
Okay.
Right? I don't think it's fair enough to say, it's just our population. That's just throwing it off and excusing it. So my hiring practice, for instance, when I hire someone in the city, I post the job call, and I have the job description that goes up. Applications come in during a window of opportunity. And when they come in, I take all of them, I code them, I remove every bit of identifying information from them, name, address, birthday, all that stuff. So nobody, in theory, they don't know who they're doing. And I pass it to 3 of my relevant staff members, and I say, rank these based on this job experience.
Wow, so you remove the identity.
I remove the identities from
awesome.
these applications, and I put them in front of a panel of 3, and they rank them based on, they put them literally in order of who they think, based on what we're looking, based on their presented skills and resume packet, where do they fit? 1, 2, 3. And then I code them all into a system, and I take the cumulative, because usually what ends up happening, if I've got like 9 applicants, for instance,
Yeah.
the top 3 or 4 are about the same on all 3 rankers. They just might have, somebody's 2 might be somebody else's 1, right? So it's all, whatever, weeds itself out. And then I do the cumulative, and I call in those top 3, 3 or 4 people for interviews, do in-person interviews, and then we do the same thing. We got a panel who interviews. When they leave, we don't discuss it. We rank based on the things that we know we're looking for in the position.
Okay.
And then after everybody has been interviewed, we sit and we say, okay, who's coming to the top, right? And that's to try to help me remove my bias, both political, racial, whatever, because I'm trying to be fair in hiring practices, because I think in our positions for so long, people have appointed friends and friends of friends and people with certain last names and stuff like that. And that they weren't necessarily the qualified people for the job. But here I am trying to find and create opportunities to be equitable for folks in my society, but I'm getting no or hardly any racial minorities applying. So when I look at that, and I think it'd be easy to say, well, that's just because they chose not to, because they had every fair opportunity to do so. But did they? Did they feel comfortable? Like, did they really think, or have we just? And so that's why I think it's important. Yes, I'm a white woman, and we can talk for a whole separate segment on white feminism and the atrocities that have been, and the ways it's helped and hindered and everything else. But I am the first woman to hold this seat.
Yes.
And so maybe the next woman to hold this seat will be a Latina woman, or maybe she'll be an African American woman, or whatever. The gender barrier is at least, from right now, busted.
Right.
Right? So what next? Because as soon as they can see someone who they're not used to seeing in the position, Dustin, this is why you're so important on this council, right? Because as soon as they can see people who are not like what they're used to seeing in the position, then it opens up the door for other people that they're not used to seeing. And I think that's important. And so I hope that as we do that, I hope as people watch our live meetings and they see women on boards that haven't been on boards before, where it's all been men, and they see women with different skin tones on boards where nobody with different skin tones have ever been on boards before. When they see that on our live streams of our meetings in Charlestown, I hope that some little girl or some little African American boy or Latino boy is watching, and they're like, okay, well,
so
I can see myself in this.
So you're saying that, one, you've been able to find a way to remove racial identity, gender identity in your hiring practice, or at least you have a process that you're working on, which is, I got to commend that, because a lot of people can't do that, and a lot of people are not saying that they're doing that. And I've got to commend that, because that's helping you diversify your office, right? Looking at the talent
It's
first,
pulling the talent forward.
It's pulling the talent in. And when you peel back the covers, whether they're black, green, yellow, or otherwise, you're saying welcome aboard.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. So I've got to imagine that you probably have people that are on committees and boards or working in your administration who might not have otherwise been there.
Yep.
And so do you have a diverse, or I should say a racially diverse employment?
Yeah, so I used to have the numbers memorized by heart, and there's been a little bit of changeover, but we have I'd have to do the math, but I want to say that somewhere it was just below 50-50 on men and women by the time I got done with all the various appointments I have. There were like about 22 appointments that
Awesome.
that as mayor I was responsible for doing across the board, and I tried to keep it. I tried to get it. It's a blend of saying I'm going to actively, and some people will criticize this. Let's just say it. Some people will criticize my approach to looking and highlighting women and racial minorities over somebody else. But my thing is, are they qualified? Because if I can go out and find a woman, if I can go out and find, a Hispanic woman, right, who has the qualifications to sit on one of my boards, then, and a person like that has never had the chance to sit on one of my boards, then of course I'm going to favor that person over anybody else.
Well, you're
because
building equality.
Bring it to the table. Bring that kind of diversity to the table, because not only do they bring different experiences, different subcultures,
Yes.
right? Different awareness of education level is important. I've tried to diversify education level in there too. I've got people that hold doctorates that sit on my boards, and I've got people who graduated high school. It's okay. I look at my community and I say, who's here? Who's living in Charlestown? And can they see themselves running their government? Because they should be able to. We are a government of the people, so they should be able to look at that government, and it shouldn't all look like one homogenous thing. It should look like the people who live in my city. So yeah, I do favor wherever I
building an
can.
inclusive community. Congratulations. Dustin, let's talk about city government and Jeff. Same makeup? How's hiring practices? Can you share in that? And do we have a diverse employment here? What's the makeup?
What I can say is that the police department and fire departments have actually come into the community, I think at the Ken Ellis Center. One may have been at the Envision Center to hold job fairs for interested persons who may be interested in being on the police or fire department. With respect to our other jobs, those are posted on the city website, and I don't know if they post those on Indeed or wherever else they post them. I'm not intimately involved with that process. The city council doesn't do as much as a lot of people think we do. Okay. But the policy, we don't have. I know that we work to appoint, with our appointments, I have tried to diversify my appointments to make sure that we have representation on boards. I know in the fire merit commission in working with Joe Hurt, the president of the fire union, we've had increased African American representation on the merit board, which is the board that actually hires the firemen. We have a number of department heads that are African American, which traditionally are police chief and the fire chief, and I believe the head of our sewer department is African American. Also sanitation, which would be traditionally the sanitation street department would be where you would have an African American appointee.
Okay.
But this administration has expanded beyond that, and I commend Mayor Moore for that because it's unusual, and I'm sure he takes some hits for that.
He takes some hits for making sure that black people have positions?
That you have a African American fire chief and police chief?
So
absolutely.
So the community thinks negative.
I didn't say the community. I said I'm sure he takes some hits.
Why would he take hits on that?
Because we know that there are people who are racist in the community.
So so the racial makeup
people are there. We got 50,000 people.
Right. So some people would be mad that we have a black police chief and a black fire chief.
Well, this is America.
No, this is Indiana. But I'm just curious. Okay,
Miguel is city government. People get mad because you got too much clover growing on your square. Sometimes people just get mad over things that you wouldn't think they get mad over.
So, but then Jeff has. We would say Jeff has, based on this description, and we're creating equity and equality in Jeff. Is that fair to say that our elected officials are doing that against all odds? Like we're fighting to eradicate racism in Southern Indiana.
Well, I think that would be an affirmative statement. And I can also say that last December, I contacted Mayor Moore about declaring Juneteenth a holiday and today the city is off for Juneteenth because of that conversation I had with him.
So, okay, I great. We declared a holiday. That's awesome.
That's unusual as well.
Why? What's so
Why is it
so unusual?
It took 40 years for it to happen.
Okay.
I mean, they celebrate in Texas, but
all right, awesome.
It didn't happen in the United States until last night.
And officially in Jeff, we now have a holiday.
Yeah, that happened in December.
That happened in December. Awesome. And Treva as well in Charlestown?
Yeah, so ours wasn't in December, but I think this is where we can talk about the power that we have in our different offices, right? So you've got a legislative office member here, and then you've got an executive office member here, right? And so I've talked about how my position of power, and so here legislation can set those things. Council can set those holidays before anybody else does. Where I was watching, with eager steps, when was Biden going to sign this legislation? Because so last year, what I did was I did issue a mayoral proclamation recognizing Juneteenth, Freedom Day, as a significant day and encouraging people to understand what it means, the history behind it, why it's significant, specific to Charlestown. Because even though Indiana was not a slave state, again, we can't gloss that over and say that we weren't impacted by slavery.
Yes.
Okay. And so we did the proclamation, and it was more of a symbolic thing. And some people were like, well, that has no teeth. Well, okay, maybe not. But it starts the conversation. Isn't that a step forward? We're not leaping from here to here overnight. So isn't that a step in the right direction? And so as soon as Biden signed last night, and I saw that OPM said that a lot of feds were going to be off and everything, and I realized, and I got on the phone with other elected official, and I was like, hey, how do you feel about this? Should we close? Do we do it Monday? Do we do it Friday? Do we wait till next year? And she was like, no, I'm good with doing it Friday. And so we started spreading the word. It was the end of the work day yesterday, so we started spreading the word to folks, and we threw up a post on Facebook, put a note on the door that we're closed. And so it's interesting watching the feedback on that, though, because again, social media, people get behind keyboards and they sometimes say things that they might not say to your face. And so, and the emojis, the emojis, where you can express so much with just a little cartoon face or heart or whatever. The laughing emoji was used on our notification. I thought, now what's funny about declaring Juneteenth? And then there was a couple of comments of folks who were like, oh yeah, they're going to take their day off. And so I'm catching a little heat. I'm catching a little heat for shutting down that fast and saying, but I think it's significant.
Yes.
Because what it does is it lends an air of authority to it that says, yes, this is significant. This event justifies a day off for people as a national holiday, as a local holiday. We will shut down our work because we recognize the significance of this.
So what is the significance? I'm just curious. So for people
I think it's honoring the end of, as I posted today on social media, it's just the way we communicate, it seems, that it's a good start in, it's honoring the end of America's original sin.
Okay.
And that's what I posted. So that's the way I feel about it.
And
we want to talk about, all through growing up, or I'd say once my college days and as an adult, people say, people talk about reparations. Well, I wasn't alive when that happened and this and that. And Barack Obama said when John Lewis died that he was one of our founding fathers because he was behind the Civil Rights Act.
Okay.
And I hadn't thought about it in that way, but yeah, because once that act was put in place, it was a new day for African Americans and our ability to vote and the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and all those things. That was a new day. So that's kind of the start of legally enforceable freedoms that we should have already had.
Okay.
But you still have a number of things that keep happening that we're slowly overcoming on the national level. But we also, so in my role, I try to do that and help do that on a local level. It's not, of course, it's in a lot of different ways, but you do what you can where you are to get things done. I wanted to say on the critical race theory, it was funny because we're talking about this because there was a meeting that came around today that trying to legislatively ban the teaching of critical race theory is the prime example of systemic racism.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then that's one of the truest things I've seen on social media in a long time. So, you know, it's.
But in our institutions, like locally, we don't really teach Black history anyway. So
Right.
I mean, even if you ban it, you're only doing something. You're only just putting a rule to something that we don't do. I mean,
But doesn't everything have to start somewhere though? And I don't know where it's being considered as a part of a curriculum. But
So let me-
once it is somewhere, then it can filter to other parts.
so as a leader in this community, do we? And we've got to wrap up. And I've got to, you know, there's a lot going through my head as we're talking. You know, so yes, we got to start somewhere. So okay, hypothetically, no, I mean not hypothetically, they're going to ban critical race theory, right? So cool, they're going to ban it. We already, definitely in this community, hardly teach Black history anyway. So if education, and you kind of said this, education is a way through systemic racism, but I keep hearing, you know, systemic racism going through the education system. So I'm like, how do you get out of it? Or are they really training Black people to stay in their lane? And in this community, all we're doing is teaching Black people that they have a place. And we're not really working toward equality or equity. We're just saying Black people in Indiana, here's your place, you're gonna stay in it. Not only you're gonna stay in it, we're gonna teach you how to stay in it. But that's what but that's my ears.
Well, I'm saying that education is helpful in tearing down and combating systemic racism. It's not a way out because we're still in America. So the more educated people you have, and then they're able to work in the institutions that continue the systemic racism, then you have people who can say, okay, no, we don't want to do that.
So Black judges.
Black judges?
Do we have any Black judges?
In Clark County?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Do we have?
We
any
have one Black lawyer. I can't do everything, Miguel.
We're gonna have to work on that. We just gotta clone you, duplicate it, and put it out there. Look, we gotta wrap up because I know we've got. I have a lot of questions and I have a lot more. I mean, this has been intriguing for me, and I appreciate it. I really do appreciate y'all sitting here.
Quickly,
no, go ahead.
But we do. So I'm looking for the next African American lawyer that comes up, and then I can support running for judge.
There you
There
go.
it is.
But it has to be. You have to get the education.
Okay. So, but we got to get the education.
But there are
Yeah.
things you can do where you don't have to have the education.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, so when the job is open or whatever, like appoint the people, like
Yes.
with the allies, okay, speaking to white allies, right, specifically for white allies, when you're in a position of power and influence, look for those opportunities to bring people to the table who haven't been there before. Because if we bring those folks to the table and then sit back and let them do their job and show that representation, then we are empowering people. Then we just sit back and shut up and let them do their job, you know, but bring them to the table, use your power for those types of things, and be okay saying, I don't know about this, I haven't experienced this, but I want to bring you to the table, because that's going to get us further. Not everybody's going to get through the hurdle of going to school and going to an education.
Yes.
But those of us that are in positions of leadership and power, or who have media channels and opportunities, when you see a Black woman or a Latina woman or a young, you know, Black male who's going to run for office, get behind them and just encourage them. I'm not saying you have to agree with every single platform issue they have, but at least invite them to the table and say, let's put more people that look like all of our people at the table making the decisions.
There it is. So leadership, recruit, inclusion. I mean, you have the pure definition of it in that statement. Education, right? The more we educate ourselves, and when that's our step forward. That's our steps. All right. Y'all heard it here. I appreciate the two of y'all really being here. This is Miguel. This is Common Conversations. We're gonna take a quick break, and then when we come back, we have Trent FIndley with Metro United Way, who's gonna share some things with us. And then we're gonna take a break after that, and then Teah and I are gonna wrap up. This has been a great 2 days. I think it's been a long one for me. My brain is about half dead. But I appreciate y'all being here and doing this. And hopefully we can do more of this.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate being here.
Whenever you're ready. Yo, this your boy Miguel, and welcome to Common Conversations. Yeah, that's it. 2020 is behind us. It was crazy. It was all kind of new. And yo, we know how to pivot. This is 2021. Let's get it in. And I want to have you on the show. Come podcast with me. Let's go live. Let's sit down and talk about all the good, the bad, the ugly, the green, the funny. Yo, kind of how we do it. This is Miguel. This is Common Conversations, and I'm inviting you to come tell your story. Let's go.
Indiana's own Dana Black here, and if you're anything like me, you get tired of waiting on the Indiana media to cover the issues that matter to Hoosier liberals, progressives, and Democrats. Our issues and candidates seem to always get ignored. Now, you don't have to wait to hear from left-leaning blue politicians regarding the issues that matter to us. Turn Left is your information source. Join us each Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern on Facebook Live. Turn Left, Indiana politics from the left side of things.
Start it up.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, my name is Trent Findley, and I'm Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Metro United Way here in Louisville. Our mission is to empower individuals to achieve their full potential to lead a better life. We know that we will win this fight by being intentional about providing opportunities such as this one to give individuals the chance to scale their impact and to act in new, innovative, and transformative ways. At Metro United Way, we understand that viewing everything with an equity lens is a huge part of our work, and we want to lift this community and help others to stand who have not had that opportunity in the past. So we just want to say that we thank you for tuning in. We truly are looking to be inclusive of everyone. We understand the pain of the Black community from the past, and we just want to say that we would want this whole community to stand with us. And happy Juneteenth.
My name's Elise Owens. I'm ready to tip over Pandora's box. I'm ready to unwind the intertwined snakes trapped inside the vines. I am truly ready for the masquerade mask to finally fall and for the truth to drop the camouflage. Living our truth is absolute chaos and destruction to them. But then again, who really likes consequences? Who really likes to have the finger being pointed at them? Who really likes to have to clean up the mess that they made? Nobody. But who really needs consequences? Who really needs to be held accountable? Anyone and everyone. We've seen what happens when one isn't. So when we as a community, a coterie, a faction, start to break away from a system that never welcomed us, a system that never intended for our stay to be joyful and easy, keep in mind that we received everything but that. Just like in the great game of Jenga, when that one distinct piece is removed, it all comes tumbling down. Once we all come to a consensus as a community and realize that we as a community are that one distinct and sacred piece, and realize that the game comes tumbling down without us, we can finally rebuild our own game with our own rules. Now, our first few rounds were paused by massacres, assassinations, and drownings. But we're on the come up. We're on the rebound. The ball is in our court. The scent of silent compliance has grown quite spoiled and stale. The smell of fear has a very unique and distinct scent, which can easily be confused with the notion of minding one's business or choosing not to be argumentative. But as long as we stand with nose plugs in, we can't be surprised when we finally smell what they're cooking up this whole time. Unplug yourself. I'm willing to reopen and to plunge into my most deepest and most painful wounds. I'll go so deep that I'll plant new knowledge and new sorrow, and watch it bloom and resonate into something so beauteous and captivating, almost surreal-like. My people's pain has once again become entertainment and exciting to many. A hashtag, a repost, a trend, a constant battle to prove that our lives matter. This is not a Halloween costume. I cannot take my blackness off when it's not convenient to me. This right here is the true ride or die. This right here is the only rep that I said. This is a part of me. They'll keep poking and poking at our wounds, and they'll proceed to act surprised when we react and call us irrational. Hoping to see defeat on our tired faces. Hoping to see the white flag waving in alliance. Hoping to prevail over our tired hearts and tired souls. We'll leave them in despair and despondency. Giving up and giving in has never been our forte. Enduring and prevailing has always been our taste, a bittersweet taste really. Tart-like with sweet notes and tail. Moving forward, as we begin to drop the shackles and the leg irons impressed in our minds, as we begin to get up and dust ourselves off from being under Uncle Tom's boot for far too long, we will become drenched in the smell of triumph victory. Don't worry, I've gotten a whiff of it. It smells divine. You'll love it. Moving forward, as long as we keep our minds and our hearts clear and our eyes envision with the ending goal, we will be there in Fort Worth and arrive with gratitude and joy. Finally getting to wipe the sweat from our foreheads and rest. But not for too long, of course. There's so much work to do. Moving forward, we will rise and blossom once again. This is per usual for us. You may have thought you had us, but you never did. You may have thought that you had outsmarted us. But at this game, we are the grand masters. Moving forward, we will rise. Moving forward, we will blossom. Moving forward, we will conquer. Once again and once and for all.
3, 2, 1.
Yo, what it do? What it do? We're back in the house. I really hope y'all like Elisa's poem. That young lady is inspiring.
Yes, she is. She can write.
Yeah, and the more I listen to it, the more I'm like, yay! But man, babe, how you doing?
It's been a long, wonderful 2 days. I'm doing fine. I was only here for half of it and came back for a little bit today. So
yeah.
All right. So we're gonna wrap this up.
We're gonna wrap this up.
Okay.
You know, it's been because I'm about brain dead, and I don't know anybody. How often, if you don't realize, like the more you do this, because you're a therapist and you talk to people all day long, and you know. The process that you go through to do organic conversation is really neat because after a minute you don't want to keep saying the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And you're really looking for people to feed and dodge and jump and hide and hurdle. But hopefully you as the viewer saw what we do in the process of having a conversation about racism. Like you got to experience it firsthand. In the sense that these are the things how people feel, these are people's opinions, these are the things that come out. And that was the whole goal here, right? So that you could experience it and then walk away and say, okay, here's the thing. How do we move forward to a post-racial?
No, I don't.
Anti-racial?
I mean, I don't know that it's a post-racial thing. I think we really have to look at doing this in steps and stages like we've been doing it the whole time. What's different about this particular time period is that I know that some of our viewership is like they keep saying white people. They keep saying white people. Yeah.
Not all white people.
Well, I don't think it's about that. I think what it is about is that we have more engagement and more involvement from white people.
Yes.
And I think I'm seeing more of a willingness for there to be a shift, whether they are feeling a little bit more compelled to do it, or it's a heart move, or it's an empathy move. But developing the language to make that happen is very challenging, because I was in a group yesterday and this morning. I feel like this is our whole life. Like, I feel like we need a break from each other, but this is our whole life, where it's like, well, what do I say? Am I going to say the wrong thing? But if I don't say anything, then that means my silence is violence. And so I really hope that, if anything, that this conversation was an exercise in, okay, so you're feeling some kind of way about something. So you're feeling this. Make a note that this is something that I'm curious about, or I got angry about, and let's figure out how to articulate that. So I don't know, what do you feel like was accomplished? Do you feel like discussions on diversity, equity, and inclusion with respect to race, and that's why we put race in there, because I know a lot of times, diversity means a lot of things.
Yes,
it means a lot of things, but we wanted to narrow it and focus it on race this go round. Do you feel like discussions regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion regarding race was actually addressed in this spot? Do you feel that way?
I would like to say yes. I think we got a good start, right? And I think that having such a diverse cast of speakers allowed for that, because we got to hear, different people's experiences, different people's expertise, different people's opinions about where we are. Of course, everybody
and the
likes
youth
to go
as
to
well,
US.
and the young folks as well.
I think more importantly, it was more. I wish there was a young man that was supposed to make it and he didn't make it. I really enjoyed their conversation more so than the adult, and I think it's unfortunate, because when Kendia and Shug kind of started talking a little bit, it's a bit emotional to hear our children struggle the way that we struggle with racism. And they're such a young age, and it's kind of, in that sense, it was hard to hear.
Right.
I'm glad that they had the courage to say it, because there's some adults who don't have the courage to say it.
Yes.
And so hopefully, I think people can take something away with that and maybe begin to have a conversation with their children, because I think we get into this world where we say, our kids are too young to understand this. Our kids are too young, so we're not going to explain it to them. But all the while, our kids are going through it.
Right.
We're just not talking to them the same way we're not talking to anybody outside of us.
Right.
And so I was, it was encouraging to hear them share their story and tell their truth. And I think as leaders in this community, when they hear this, as legislators in our community, when they hear that, maybe they'll take a step in a moment to say, we need to be speaking more and learning more truths, so that the policies that we're going to write, if we're going to exist in this utopia of no racism, we're going to make those kind of changes. They'll start where the change matters, and that's with our kids.
Okay. Right. That question about, I think there was a question you asked of me, and it was regarding, what are we going to do to eradicate racism? And I'm thinking, well, apparently it's useful. There's something that's useful about it here, and so I think it's, how do we kind of tamp down on its effectiveness, which I'm not really sure that we actually ever answered that, but. I wonder if there's anything in this discussion that you feel wasn't quite laid out. I know that, we do common conversation at home anyway, and I like alliteration a lot.
Yes.
And so, when we talk about, whether it's white supremacy or anything like that, I use P's all the time. Because we talk about the system as if the system is this soulless kind of mindless nothingness. But I'm like, the system is people with policy, procedure, practice, and power.
Lay that out. Go on.
Okay. All right, and then we're gonna add politics.
Yes.
To all of that. So politics kind of wraps up all that, so that people, policy, whether I say practice, procedure, and something, and power. And that's what that is. And one of the things that I hope, if we're able to do this a little bit more and lay it out a little bit more, is to discuss power.
Okay.
And what power looks like, particularly discretionary power. You know, or the types of power that we don't think about, or it's the front desk lady. It's the front desk lady who has an incredible amount.
Who has keys.
Of power,
Yes.
you know, or it's the person, I don't know if you watched, there was Oprah. Oprah did a show with this, I think it's a football player that's doing these discussions about race. And he's done a phenomenal job because he creates a space, of course, for folks to feel comfortable to say, hey, I'm doing this, or I've noticed this. And I think that's powerful, to be able to create that kind of space where, so this woman says, you know what? I realized, she was hearing a statistic about names and how different names seem to not get the response back for employment. And she identified herself. She said, I realized that I'm that person. I'm that person who gets that resume, that sees a name that I'm not familiar with or I feel uncomfortable with, and I toss it. She said, I'm that person. And Oprah almost came up out of her seat because she was like, you know what? We just thought it was this phantom person happening. And I never thought that I would ever hear somebody actually say, I'm it. Yeah. And so when we discuss systems, we have to understand that systems, you know, are, you know, perpetuated by and run by people. And I'm hoping with this discussion, and I know sometimes it's tough to hear and it's hard to hear, but to be able to identify, you know, wow, that's me. Like, that's something that I do that I thought was a harmless thing that really shifts and changes the trajectory of another human being's life. I mean, if that person was unqualified, they just not qualified.
Well, as you're saying this, what I love about what Treva offered, what Mayor Treva in Charlestown, her population is 98% Caucasian, you know, but she created an inclusive hiring practice. And I was like, you know, how unique is that? Because you don't hear that often.
Right.
And I think there's a difference. One, you know, Dustin is a city council person, you know, Treva's mayor, two different roles in that world, you know, where Dustin's saying, hey, we post stuff, you know, but Treva was like, yeah, we don't just post it. We look for it. We get an application. We remove the name, the gender, right? We remove race, and we look at their skill set.
Right.
And say, is this a skill set we can use?
Right.
And then we hire, and then we bring the person in and we look at them.
Right.
Now we're part, because we already made the decision.
Yes.
And I'm like, you can't get any more inclusive.
Yes, than that.
And you know, I hope that other people heard that, because that's something, as we're saying, you know, where we have disparities in the housing, or we have disparities in jobs, or we have disparities in business development and economics, you know, we can look at it as a people and say, how do we take race out of it? How do we take gender out of it and focus on talent, skill, and man?
But you have to admit that it's a factor.
Yes.
You know, and it has to be admitted that there's a bias. And, you know, and that's what she said. She said, you know, I have to, you know, acknowledge that I have a bias, or that is a factor. And that's what this entire discussion has been about, is to say, you know what, it's all right for you to admit that race and whatever it means. So I think we need to expand that, you know, race or somebody's ethnicity and whatever that means to you when you're unfiltered, that becomes a factor. And the harder you try to push it away says to me how big of an issue it actually is.
Ooh, say that again, baby.
So race is a factor. So the harder you try to push it away, the more it says to me how big of a factor it is. Because that's what we do, and it's really almost it's shame almost. So in my work, you know, the things that you want to tuck away, the things that we want to hide, are the things that we are most ashamed of. And shame is a powerful thing. And the way to take away the power of shame is to actually go ahead and tell on it.
Okay.
Go ahead and tell on it so that it doesn't control you. It doesn't control your movements. It doesn't control your decisions. It doesn't control how you show up or how you don't show up. But, maybe we should have a discussion on shame and power, because I don't.
It could be that as well. I think, I don't know. It's been enlightening. It really has. I mean, it's been a great experience to both moderate all of this and interview everybody. I think it's also been a great experience to kind of watch some of the interviews.
Yeah.
And how other people engage in different conversation. And I hope that that's something that people took away from it as well.
Yeah.
Because, the way you do a thing is not going to be the way I do it.
No, it's
not. The way
not.
Nicole did a thing is not going to be the way you're going to do it or I'm going to do it. And the thing is because you allow different people to be involved, another thing Trevet said, allowing people to do a thing that have never done a thing before opens up even more opportunity. And again, that's inclusion. I don't know that we really got to equity. I think we all danced around it. I think we all are still very new in this idea of ownership and black people having equity. I think even black people
are
not really sure how we tackle this thing of equity. And wealth. What we do know, and Chad said it, what we do know is that the wealth gap is widening and black people in this country are having less and less and less. And I love the fact that he qualified it in a sense of saying wealth is not about your salary, right? And a lot of people think, I'm going to get wealth through a salary. And it's not true, because here's the thing, people, you can't hand down a job.
Right.
Wealth is about ownership. It's about land. It's about building businesses. It's about having stake, right? And so I love that he said it, but I think it's relatively new. We're gonna go to a commercial and then we're gonna talk a little bit more, and then we're gonna wrap up and we're gonna go home and eat something, or not. So Rakai, whenever you're ready to take us to commercial, we're just gonna sit here and look at each other with Google eyes. On June 17th and 18th, we are inviting you to face a common conversation about race, inclusion, diversity, equity, and the impact systemic racism has had on white and BIPOC communities. Our esteemed group of panelists include Indiana's own Dana Black, Charlestown Mayor Treva Hodges, State Representative Cherish Pryor, and Louisville's own Tim Finley Jr., and a host of other influential community leaders. Join us as we embark upon brave and necessary conversations about the move forward.
Start it up.
We're gonna wrap this
What's your
up.
name?
Well,
So
my name
cute.
is Teah. Come on, because so let's just do a final wrap up here. And you were asking what, I guess what are we going for here? Are we going for post-racial? I don't even understand what that means. Of course, anti-racism. Of course, who wouldn't want to be an anti-racist? But it's. Yesterday, I was at a quinceañera practice and of a friend of ours, and our daughter was invited to be a part of that. And I'm so very, very grateful. And I was sitting there and I was looking at all these young people, all these kids, and I thought, wow. And it was a variety of kids. It was a variety. They were different races, different heights, different, everything. And it felt so good. Like none of them seemed to care. At the same time, none of them seemed to mind the difference and didn't try to deny the difference. And I think part of equity, so this is just something to take from the discussion now, that part of equity is saying, look, we can all be in the same space, but you don't have to be the same as I am. And I can recognize your differences, how you look different, how you think different, what it is that you're bringing to the table that's different, and still feel okay and not threatened by that. I don't have to feel silenced by that. I don't have to feel like you're taking away something from me by that. So if we're going to talk about that, I think it's important that equity doesn't look like assimilation.
True story. I like that. Yes.
Equity does not look like diversity. Looks like assimilation.
Yes.
So we've got a whole different group of people in a room that look the same or look different, but are essentially the same kind of folk. Or if the folk don't think the same, they're not gonna say nothing. They're just gonna they're just gonna be there. But here's this spot. But as long as you're really no different than I am, or as long as you're not saying anything that I disagree with, you're welcome in this spot. That's diversity. Inclusion looks like, okay, here's the party. We'll have your input, in the party. And all right, so you get to plan part of this, and yes. but it better be
the way we want it.
We want it.
And I like that because, and I'm going to just keep pulling up all the conversations.
Or what we're comfortable with. Yeah. Hopefully we went through enough inclusion classes to be comfortable with what she's saying.
What you're saying, right. I like what Chad said, because Chad said, on a board of 9 people, if one of them is different, right, and, the 8 are going to have control, and they're going to always control vote. And he said, I like inclusion. He said, because inclusion is grabbing that one person and allowing them to make the decisions and us following them. Yes. That's inclusion. And, I hope that when we look at city commissions, when we look at boards, when we look at our economic chambers, when we look at the things that make up a community, that we're making sure that we are inclusive in including, and I am speaking specific to the Black and brown community, that we're bringing them to the table, right? And not only when we bring them to the table, we're one, listening, 2, we're allowing them to participate, and we're giving them the same power that you would give someone who doesn't look like them. And I hope that we get to a point where we're doing it, and maybe we are. And as we take first steps and first efforts, I'm not a really big person on commending somebody for their first effort. Because the thing about creating habits and having a habit, and you said it, the future has a past. The reality of it is when we study the past, first efforts tend to go back to same efforts, because we don't get the second, third, fourth, and fifth efforts. But I believe this was a great day, and I'll wait for a lot of folks' feedback to see what they got out of it. Hopefully they got a lot out of it, and we'll get to do more of them.
Yes.
Because
because we need to. It's just the beginning. So if you have any feedback, if there are any topics that you felt like were not discussed, or if there were some voices that you felt like we're missing here, please feel free to let us know at Common Conversations. You can find us on Facebook as well as Instagram, because this is about moving forward, and it is an entire team and group effort. The conversation is so much larger because we were talking about just having a conversation with Black folk about Black folks' role in this.
Yes,
Sometimes we don't. Sometimes Sometimes
we get in our own way.
Sometimes we will get in our own way for various reasons. And some of that might have to do with, the outside system, but then we also have to work on, who we are and where we are as a people. Because that's a whole other conversation.
It absolutely is. And to walk away with that, we've been part of the system.
We have been part of the system, yes.
And a tool in the system.
Yes.
And we've all been trained. And
yes.
you talked about that with Nicole and Missy,
mm-hmm.
In terms of,
the training that we have to kind of keep it the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and to protect our own stuff,
yes.
because there's a fear sometimes at making those steps and taking those steps that we know are the right steps to take, but we might lose. What are we gonna lose? and so we're really coming from a space of fear and scarcity.
Yes.
I've worked hard to get what I have.
Right.
I've worked hard to get what I have, and I'm gonna trade up my truth to keep my space in my place. And it's like, can you blame people for that? I don't know, but we also have to look at what the consequences of that, is. But we about to go into a whole. I thought we was wrapping
up.
We
are wrapping up, but you said it, and it just came to me like Treva was talking about.
This is exactly what happens all the time in life.
And it was like, I didn't know I was black. You're right, I do, because.
Oh, what did you say? I didn't know that you were black.
She didn't know she was black.
Oh, okay.
We could talk about that too when you didn't know.
Oh, I knew.
Okay.
I didn't know you were.
Yeah, she knew she was black. She didn't know I was black. Let me tell y'all a story.
Oh my gosh.
We're not gonna do this here. Yeah, we are. No, we not. So we done, huh?
No, go ahead.
All right, so Treva was explaining about the lady who finally, she said she went to Louisville, didn't realize she was black, and there's consequences for black people, definitely specifically in this country, not knowing their history, not knowing who they are. But I think even more so when she said, I can't say that there's not a racial issue in Charlestown, but what I can say is that, if everybody's comfortable staying in their lane, we don't know what happens when you step out of it.
Right.
And that's a training. Like, if we train black people to be a certain way, no different if you train white people or Hispanic, Latino people, whatever, to be a certain way.
Yeah, or women or whoever else, yes.
When they step out and say, hey, I want something different, this doesn't work for me.
Yes.
Now there's an issue.
Well, this is what we call a script. This is what we call a script. In my world, a script, a schema, it's that everybody has a role, everybody has a space, everybody has a place, and everybody has to maintain that role or position in order to maintain that system.
Yes.
That happens in families.
Yes.
So we got families sometimes where, you might have a high level of whether it's serious substance use, abuse, really kind of rigid, maybe religious ideas or rigid, maybe military ideas. So the country actually lives in a state of rigidity. Over the last year, it shook that rigidity. And that's why folks felt really anxious, because we were no longer predictable. The phase that we were in was kind of predictable because this is what we do, because this is a nation that's full of injustice. And so ultimately movements are gonna, rise to combat that.
Yes.
But that level of rigidity was really hit really hard. So folks got anxious. Nobody knew what was going on. But those moments give us opportunity to develop some flexibility in who we are in our system and to shift and change and do whatever it is that we need to do in order to become better. And I'm hoping that that's what we're beginning to do here. It is a long fight, and it's still going to be a while, but we're in it, and we're hoping that our young people pick up on it and do it even better than what we've been able to do.
Yeah,
So
that's
my final word on it,
That's
sir.
your final word?
That's it. I'm not
That's
talking
her
anymore.
Final word.
I'm done.
She said she's not taking no more of my questions. We're not talking about it. It's over. I get it. I love you. It's been a long day. Predictability. Be unpredictable. It's been an unpredictable environment for the last more than just a year, but for the year, things have just exploded, and I think hopefully for the better.
Yep.
And we will move beyond first steps. We will move beyond conversation.
Yes, and change your role.
Yes.
Maybe you change your role up a little bit, shift your role a little bit, and that's what transforms things.
Yes.
Is really shifting the role you play.
And so with those words, I want to say thank you to, Metro United Way. I want to say thank you to One Southern Indiana Economic Chamber, because they shifted a role and they say, hey, we'll support this endeavor. And there's a handful of other partners who have come out. There's a long list. They're going to show here in a second.
And thank Cassie.
And I want to thank Cassie, because we're sitting in their computer room. And when I said, hey, I would love to do this in our community and the Black community in a space that it caters to economically challenged folks in our community, and they do. They work with those who are economically challenged, and they also work with the Black community and a lot of services. And so they have this awesome, great new computer lab that I think people should definitely take advantage of. And so I thank them for allowing us to occupy this space and set up this and do a thing. I thank those who listen and tune in, and who will be listening and tuning in later. And I really want to say, those of you who brave this conversation and brave to take action, the folks up in Jasper, I don't know if they'll get to see this.
I'm sure someone will.
But the conversations we've had with them over the last couple of years have been amazing. And here's a community that's 98% Caucasian and shifted it,
doing it,
did something unpredictable, and I love that. So this is Common Conversations. We go live typically every Wednesday. My next series is we're still doing the Bob series, right? So we're covering and doing interviews of Black-owned businesses locally to Kentuckiana, New Albany, Jeff, and Louisville. And so that is still on the table, and we will start scheduling there. So you can always go to www.commonconvo.com or .tv to reach out. And then we're also going to do a series. We're going to continue the series on investment. And so we've been talking to some folks across the country in terms of cryptocurrency. I've got a couple interviews that are coming up with some real estate moguls, young people who are doing some amazing things in California, who said, hey, we have figured out a way to build income. And they said, can we get on the show and make it happen? I was like, let's go, because whatever they're doing out there, folks can do it here. So, we're going to be hopefully in a constant state of education and influence and sharing. I would love to get your feedback. Go to our Facebook, groups, our Twitter, our Instagram. And with all that being said, this is Miguel, this is Common Convo, this is the wife, Miss Teah. Rakai and Nikki, thank you for hanging out in this hot room for the rest of the day. Y'all can kill this feed whenever y'all ready. I'm done. Peace, love, and hair grease.
Thank y'all.